so we call the regularly scheduled November board meeting of the Highgate School Board to order at
6:32.
6:32. Oh, well, we're pretty close to being on time.
Hello, Mr. Roddy.
Ma'am, how are you?
Well,
Good to see you.
Okay, so are you going to be the timekeeper, Mr. Roddy?
I can.
Okay. I have no idea about agenda amendments.
I have none.
I don't have any. I read it, and
I think Chris has something to bring up.
yes, he does. Under buildings, under roof, under.
Okay. Oh, yes,
business
under the
report.
roof. You're
Yep.
right. Okay, so we don't need an amendment because it's
Right.
there. Okay, so next month we are having an SBAC presentation.
Cool.
And in January we're having an early ed presentation. Okay?
I do not have a roof repair update or a parking lot project update. Does someone else in this room?
Winton has a parking lot and Winton has a roof repair.
Okay.
And Chris does a roof repair.
Okay.
So let's go to. Am I missing something on here? Oh, the technology. It is. I just can't read well.
Really should learn that.
Welcome, Mike, and welcome, Ethan.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Just 2 seconds while we're getting everything hooked up here. I have a couple of things to give everybody. There's a bit of guidelines for what we're going to be talking about today. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank
They
you.
had to be out of
Chris
here
is
by
here.
the 20th or 6th, I think,
Okay.
so.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. I do have additional
Although
copies
this
of
wife and
business.
his mother were there. So.
We have one more board member.
Absolutely. Sure. And you can see later. So what I just handed you is kind of a more complete vision of what I'll be talking about today. The only thing that I don't really get into in this particular report that I just handed you are some of the specifics of what the budget's actually going to look like. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to show you a couple of different options, and I wanted to talk to you about what might be the best fit for Highgate.
So Ethan, this might be a good time for me to just take 60 seconds to put a little context.
Absolutely.
So after Ethan had started here and had been here a relatively short period of time, he undertook quite a few projects and made a lot of progress really quickly. And one of the things that I felt like that I thought was needed was sort of what I call a state of the state for technology at Highgate School. You know, we had one person in the position for about 13 years. We had not had an educational technologist before, so we had added an educational technologist 1 year, added a new technology support person this year, who seemed to be very interested in tackling a lot of clearing out of a lot of things and inventory, and not to mention a pretty strong knack for school technology systems. And so I had asked them a couple of months ago to think about preparing kind of a presentation of a state of technology at Highgate School. And also to not only kind of lay the land of where are we now, but where do we need to go. And I think Laura has talked a lot about the need for a lot of our, certainly our major line items to have multi-year plans. So we thought this would be a great time with a pretty serious approach at the budget, the way it's going to appear. I mean, changes from this point forward shouldn't be many or significant. But this was probably a great time to get that report on technology and maybe to be able to answer some questions about the request for technology in the budget. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hardin. I appreciate the introduction. As he's talked about just a moment ago, we did a very thorough evaluation of everything here. So I'm going to give you kind of, to get everybody started, a roadmap of what it is exactly that we're going to be talking about today, just so everybody knows what to expect. Basically, we're going to start off by outlining exactly what it is that we're asking for, why, and a couple of different ways that we might be able to get to it. We're going to immediately then launch into a review talking about some of the major categories of technology here at the Highgate, to talk about different types of things and different types of tools, what we need to replace, how soon we're going to need to replace them, and what those mean to our students if we don't replace them. Last but not least, I hope to come back to kind of wrap it all up, looking at some of the benefits that we're going to see from our students by doing, and also from our staff by doing this. Thinking specifically about ways that we can improve our systems, that we can take better inventory, have more predictable budgets, and more to the point, find strategies for saving money. And at the end of the day, realistically building to the idea of how we can better involve the community and the school in a collaborative partnership to move forward so that Highgate and Highgate Elementary are the same thing. So to do this, I'd like to start first by talking about what the goals are for this particular thing that we're talking about here tonight, which is, first off, I want to make sure that all of our classrooms and all of our offices and all of the staff here have the computing technology that they need in order to do their job and to be able to support the values of this institution. In
Can I interrupt
addition,
for a minute?
please.
Do we have a copy of this in the packet, what you have up there?
I apologize, I do not. I will be able to
Okay,
print a
okay,
copy
no,
off
that's
of
great.
that.
It just informs how I take notes.
We do have, this list is actually on the first page though. Or
Oh,
should
it
be.
does. It says goals right there.
Yes, and it's the same ones. Basically, again, I promise you I will otherwise highlight if there is something that'll be
Okay.
separate. Thank you for the question, appreciate it. So, next I also want to make sure that we're not just plopping technology down into people's rooms and expecting them to be able to know how to use something. That's not the way to success. We have to have a very calculated way of how we're going to tackle professional development and to make this something that's going to be a value of the school, so that we're going to push forward using tools the way that they can be used, not just because they're there. More importantly, I want to also develop some basic standards around what decides when we have something that doesn't work and when it doesn't. If we don't know how to judge something that doesn't work, we can't make effective decisions about when to replace it. And ultimately, we end up with the situation we had here at the beginning of the year, which is a multitude of tools that don't actually provide us with the information that we need to be able to do instruction here at the school. Moving on from that, I also want to talk about how we can make resources and planning easier, because ultimately the process here of having these conversations is challenging, and it's not something that should be a willy-nilly year-to-year conversation. It needs to be part of an ongoing conversation, and one that is based on evidence and analysis and understanding of what the heck it is that we're actually purchasing. Moving on, I also want to say that we are looking for ways to provide the most cost-effective and timely purchases for everybody, while assuring that the time needed to prepare these machines for users is at the absolute minimum. I don't want teachers to have to wait months and months and months to be able to do their job. Just until recently, I had our music teacher who only just now received a computer after several months of trying to troubleshoot different secondhand machines that have come to her. And it's very much impacted her ability to provide her job effectively. That's not effective when you can't do your basic job because you don't have the machine necessary to communicate with your peers. Last but certainly not least, I also want to talk about how we can responsibly dispose of this equipment, because it does not help us to put it into sheds. The way that we handle this is we have to find ways that this can be used to make a difference for people around us. And by having a retirement plan that makes sense and is in line with what we're talking about, we can not only keep newer equipment in the school here that is working better to get the aims that we want, but more importantly, it will also pave the way for helping to get those tools that are here to members of the community as a way to enrich the conversation down the road about how technology can make us all better at what we do. And I'll get back to that piece at the end. But first things first, let's talk about the actual specifics. What am I asking you to do? Basically, we have a very simple philosophy at the foundation of this whole thing. Every 3 years, administrative staff and what I hope to eventually make the Community Learning Center, that equipment needs to be replaced. The Community Learning Center is a vision that I'd like to share for you for another day. It's not going to be the focus of this particular conversation, but it is something that I do believe that we can build towards. And what I mean by that is I want to build a facility that's going to allow people in the community and people at the school here to work together, to learn from one another, because people in the school are able to learn quite a bit from trades and different skills that our community members have. If we're not taking advantage of that, if we're not giving back to them, they're not going to see that. By making public education something that happens here and there, we're going to make that a change. And having equipment that is new and that has some of the emerging information that we can use that will allow them to design and to practice the sorts of skills that are going to be present with them throughout the rest of their life is going to give them the information and the skills that they need in order to be competitive, career-oriented individuals. For classroom equipment and generally all other things, we're looking at a 5-year replacement. And in the long run, the funny thing is, despite having such an aggressive policy, I guarantee you we will save money in the long run doing this. First things first, let's look at some options. Basically, the path here is what we're first pulling up. And I apologize if this is a bit hard to see. I can read off some of the numbers. But basically, this is looking at technology budgets for the last several years here leading into the present. In the amount budgeted, the amount that we spent, and the percent of the total that we spent, so that we can get a feel for how much of the money that we're using. Now, part of the complication here is that the information from these have different line items on every single piece, and every single one of them has very, very different values from year to year as to what we're actually using, and there's not a lot of consistency. That's bad budgeting, and it makes it very difficult to determine if we are putting too much into one area or not enough. That is something I hope to change going forward. But basically, looking at these figures right here, you can see that there are some pretty serious challenges that we have faced in the last several years. In 14 to 15, we had a $48,000 budget. That was when we initially piloted one-to-one Chromebooks here in the school. Since then, we also did the same thing in fiscal year 15-16, and now we're here into the present year. After having done emergency replacements at the beginning of the year that have been ignored for who knows how long, we had to pay already 78% of our budget has been allotted before we've even gotten to the middle of the year. That is the consequence of not doing what we need to keep track of our inventory and being proactive with repairs and replacements when they need to happen. So we basically have two options. Option one, I like to call the regular oil change method. This is the idea that if you own a car, you need to change the oil once in a while. If you don't do that, if you don't perform regular maintenance and upgrades, your car is going to be a piece of garbage within a very short period of time. The technology here is the same thing. This plan is a very realistic approach by looking at how we can increase initially a larger amount in the first year so as to replace the large number of items that we have afflicting us that are very, very much holding us back. And if by doing so, we will be able to then see reduced amounts for the years after and a conservative $2,000 increase from each year beyond, which is in keeping not only with expected raises to the costs of operating, but also just inflation as well. So this is not something that is outlandish, and this is something typical from what I have seen in many school budgets around the country that I have worked with. Option two is what I call ignoring the check engine light. It's always an option. It's certainly easy enough to just say, well, I know that there's maintenance that I have to do on this machine. I know I really should replace this thing because that warranty keeps telling me I need to. But here's the problem. When we push things past the point where they're functionally valuable, all it does is it increases the costs because it gives us emergency funds that we then have to come up with out of nowhere without any heads up that that was going to be something that is going to be a problem for us. And that is not a good way to do business. That creates problems and shortages in other parts of the school. I aim to get away from doing that and to absolutely minimize the number of emergency requests that have to be made. But you can see, this plan does not do that. This takes a much more conservative approach. This looks at just getting up to a reasonable amount that would allow us to do some basic replacements. Right now, we're far inferior when able to do that. We don't have enough. We add these in, we'll get there, and it's funny enough, this and this, both plans, are the exact same total dollar amount. The only difference is option number two will cost you more, even though it doesn't say so on paper, because of what we were just talking about. So now let's kind of step back a little bit, now that we've talked about the numbers, to kind of give you context as to what we're talking about and why this is such an important topic for us. When we undertook this attempt at reviewing what we have for an inventory at the school, it began with a lot of purging. There was a lot of stuff that needed to be tossed out. There were things that were literally here. I found one surge protector from, I'm not kidding you, it had on the bottom of it, 1982. That is beyond old for technology. To mention that that's something that we had then plugged into the server that is responsible for communicating and managing all of the network activity for Wi-Fi and internet throughout the whole building, that is a really scary thought. Because if that goes, suddenly you're looking at weeks of time where you can't have any communications between peers, where you can't have communication between other individuals in the building, let alone to be able to report on grades or anything else. That is an unbelievably disastrous situation waiting to happen. That has since been amended, and we've removed it and we've replaced it with something better. But that is just one example of what needs to happen in order to go forward. We've broken down everything into categories. Again, we have audio equipment, we have Chromebooks, we have computers and accessories, document cameras, networking hardware, projectors and accessories, which include smartboards, projectors, and so forth, and finally tablets. I'll be going into each of these to kind of explain not only what they are, but also to kind of give you some background as to what it is in each case that we have to replace and the schedule at which we're going to be doing so. Let's start off with audio equipment. These are pretty self-explanatory. If you've ever driven in a car, if you've ever sat in a place where there's a radio, you know what audio equipment is. We have audio equipment plugged into all sorts of different devices and technologies here at the school though. If we don't have these, suddenly it becomes very challenging to do things like instructional videos, to do things like anything that require music, for instance. And yet, nevertheless, the music teacher at the school here has one of the oldest pair of speakers in the building. Let's take a look, though, at what this specifically means. We have right now 89 devices in this category at the school. We are talking about 0 replacements needing to be done within the next year. That's great. Within the next 1 to 2 years, we could probably squeak it off. Within 5 years, we're looking at 68 devices needing to be replaced, with each one ranging between $20 and $100 or more. That is a lot of money that needs to be thought about in advance. And there are specific line items for this, but to give you an idea of exactly how specific and impactful this is, this includes headphones, which we use for, just as you mentioned before, SBAC. If we don't have this equipment, we have tools that, for right now, have a bad habit of doing high-pitched squealing in our kids' ears. You can imagine how hard it is to test when you have something that is literally screaming at you in your ear. And that is the most common headphone that we have, is from 2008. That is the vast majority of those devices right now. Let's move on to Chromebooks. This is something that I actually feel is going to be a real send for us to make some amazing positive changes. And I think that the direction that we've been going into in investing in this is absolutely the way to go. We'll talk about this more in a little bit when we get to computers as a whole. But what I envision going forward, and Mr. Weber here also shares the same opinion, we would like to move away from using expensive Mac computers and shift instead to using Chromebooks. And there is no reason why we cannot do this. They're less than half the price, and they provide all of the same functionality given how we use these tools here. In the meantime, though, we do want to continue this 1-to-1 ratio for the kids because we do think that it makes a lot of difference and it is an incredible opportunity for them that if we don't pursue is going to leave them at a huge disadvantage when they get over to MBU and they're expected to be competing with other individuals in their classes who have had those sorts of things throughout their entire educational careers. So looking at this, realizing right now we have 177 Chromebooks in the school. That's a lot, and that's amazing. In the next year, we have about 15 or so that will need to be replaced, mostly due to damages and maintenance, which happens. Sometimes you have defective repairs. Most of those may not need to be necessarily in there. 77, though, are going to need to be replaced within the next 1 to 2 years. And after 5 years, we're looking at all of them needing to be replaced. That's a lot of new Chromebooks. We currently are leasing them, which is a phenomenal solution to this issue. But when we get to the end of term of life for these machines, and they've been around the block for as many times as they've been, we don't really have a great solution right now as to what we're supposed to do with them. And again, we're going to come back to that issue in a little bit. As we were talking about with computers, though, I want to take a quick look at this, because right now, the bottom line is we have committed to doing Apple products for most of our teachers, and it has not resulted in equity from what I am seeing amongst our educators. We have many individuals who have been on a list to have their machines replaced for years. I have one individual, prime example, our librarian, who in The very front of her room is unable to use her smartboard because she has a machine from 2007. This machine is not able to run most of the software, let alone react quickly enough to make it a useful educational tool. Rather, it is a fancy paperweight that is making it so that she cannot do her job.
That's her smart board?
That's the computer on the smartboard from 2007. It's a Vostro 200. We have another computer that's in the room as well that's similarly old. Our gym teacher has a Dell Vostro 3400 from 2010. She actually is unable to do most things on her computer because it takes upwards of 15 to 20 minutes for her computer to turn on when she first starts it up, which is much in excess of the time that she actually has to make preparations for a class.
So what isn't she being able to do specifically because of that?
Specifically at this, the gym teacher in this case?
Or the librarian?
Sure. Our library is unable to do presentations that are very interactive right now. A lot of it is show and tell, which is not a very effective way to teach. She's aware of that. The problem is that we can't do much changing to that because the way that it's set up right now, the board is actually requiring faster transactions between her computer and the projector than it's able to do. We switch out that computer, suddenly the options for her are a lot more flexible. She can use it for interactions with other schools. She can use it to have students come up and start doing readings. They can highlight text to improve their reading skills. There's a lot of different things that we could and should be using it for that we're not able to because of the age of that machine. Because as soon as she starts it up, it crashes and then requires 15 to 20 minutes to restart. In the case of our gym teacher, the impact is perhaps a little bit less, and that might, as a result, arguably put her a little bit lower down on the list. But the question then is, does it make sense to have a 7-year-old machine for her when the rest of her peers have machines that are significantly newer? The answer is debatable, but I think at the end of the day, we could be and should be providing her with an equitable tool, given what her job responsibilities are. And if we're going to ask her to have interactions with her peers and keep in contact with them, it's not fair to ask her to do that on a machine that is actually impeding her ability to communicate because of that.
Are Chromebooks compatible with smartboards?
That's actually a great question. And the short answer is no, they're not. But here's the good thing. Going forward, there actually are better solutions than smartboards that I would like to begin pursuing investing in, that are just as interactive, that have all the same features, that cost a fraction of the price, and are 100% able to interact with them. They basically are interactive displays. They range everything from what looks like a big fancy TV to a projection screen that allows you to use a pen and to otherwise do exactly the same stuff. And again, the other good thing about that is we also don't have to worry about paying for bulbs every 6 months to 2 years, which each time can cost between $150 and $300, which is all kinds of money that we don't need to spend with those types of changes. In fact, actually, by switching to having all of our staff using Chromebooks, we would literally be saving enough money to provide each staff person with an iPad and a Chromebook for less money than we're paying right now to provide them with a Mac. Mm-hmm. And you can see here the fact that we're seeing with the inequity that we're seeing with that too. We have the MacBook Pro, which is our most commonly used computer at the school right now. We have 22 of them across the building. 8 individuals have a newer model that just came out. But that still means that we have teachers who are using 5-year-old machines. That doesn't sound like a lot, but in the world of technology, that is an absolutely incredible amount of time. The pace at which these are actually advancing is exponential. So every 6 months to a year, you're seeing a doubling of the ability of these machines. So that means that's the equivalent of having had a machine for almost 100 years ago in terms of the actual computing data that we're able to do with it. That's a pretty big difference. When it comes to some of the other tools, though, again, we have some very old equipment in addition to that you can see there on the bottom of our list. And again, Dell Vostro 3400 and Dell Vostro 1500 are models that have no business being in a school, let alone one that values its students as much as Highgate.
Are those Macs leased? Or are they ours?
Or the Macs? No.
That's a great question. They were purchased. Apple, unfortunately, does not offer that service. One of the many reasons why I prefer to get away from them. Something that I do think that is worth investing through Apple, though, is Apple iPads. But we'll get back to that in a few minutes once we've had a chance to look at these a little more. Document cameras is an area where I think that we're able to demonstrate the ability of our school and our team to make informed decisions, and one of the things that you can hope to look forward to as we move forward as well. You can see right here in front of me 2 examples of how we can solve the issue of what a document camera is. This is a document camera. What this allows me to do is it allows me to put a paper or a project or anything of that nature underneath it. It can see it with this little camera here, and it would connect then to a board, and you can see all the actions that I'm doing live. So for the teacher who has students on the other side of the room who aren't able to see what they're doing, this is the tool that gives them the ability to see close up what their teacher is trying to tell them to do, so they know very clearly what the job is that they have at hand. Here's the caveat. This guy here costs $633. That's a lot of money to pay for that service. On the other hand, I have an iPad here that is now obsolete. We'll talk about that in a minute. I know that's not something that's great to hear from anybody. But this iPad no longer can receive updates from Apple. It just can't be used for its initial purpose. What we can use it for, though, rather than putting it into a stockpile or getting rid of it, is I can plug this in, and this can suddenly become my document camera. Adjusts up and down. How much did this cost? $8. Just with this change, we saved $4,000 this year alone. I guarantee you, as we move forward, we're going to continue to find innovative ways to save money and maximize the use of our resources. We do not spend money badly here. But looking at the big picture, we do not have document cameras in each of our classrooms, even though that is a standard that we hope to have in each of our classrooms. Right now, until we have these all finished and put and delivered, which will be within the next couple of weeks, we currently have 15. We have a lot more classrooms than that. And if you look again at the numbers, we have, within 2 years, we're going to be replacing 3 of those, and within 5, we're going to be replacing 12. So that's all of them. That's a lot that are going to be obsolete. That's a lot of extra money. But if we can find solutions like this, that's a lot of savings that we can also make. And by making educated decisions, we can help to make those decisions better for the school. The next piece here is a little bit complicated to explain, and nevertheless, unfortunately, also one of the most important priorities that we have to address immediately. The school here has a network that is run off of wireless internet. That means that I can walk around with my phone or with my laptop or with any device that connects through wireless internet and use the internet, even though I'm not plugged into anything. And it does that using radio waves. Networking hardware is equipment that helps communicate between the devices and a machine that's over in the back of the central office there that allows us to have a communication between those devices and allows them to connect to the internet. In short, these are the tools that are acting like the postman for our school. It ensures the messages get from one place to another. Here's the catch. Our network is 2 years past due when it should have been improved. We're at 7 years since the last major update to this network, and that is a very, very long time. There are a lot of advances that are coming out that have not been able to be taken advantage of in that length of time. Prime example, we have all these Chromebooks, but the problem is they all connect through the internet. The amount of signal and the strength of that signal has not gotten stronger since we have had them. So while we have gotten the equipment that relies on the internet to be used, we do not have the equipment at the base foundational infrastructure to be able to deliver those services to people. And there, you can see that in the testimonials that we'll read from teachers at the end of the conversation here that address directly the problems of that fact in the white building in the basement, on the 3rd floor, and also horribly in the 3rd grade wing here at this school, which does not deserve to have months on end where it can barely use their tools. A 1-to-1 ratio does not exist if you do not have an internet connection. Looking at that, we have 69 devices that are involved in that system right now. That includes a very expensive machine that we've had since 2008. That is our server. And again, that's the postman for our entire building. That is the thing that ensures everything works. That machine is so old, we cannot update the web browser on there to use the internet on it anymore. We are using a server edition on there that is actually so old that it provides some security issues. And while the reality is relatively low, that we probably will not have some hacker break in and steal everybody's data. That is a reality. And unless we take steps to actually improve this, that is something that we have to be okay with if we decide not to do anything here. Moving forward, though, you can already see the initial impact. Within the first year, 38 of those devices need to be replaced, or we're going to continue to see all of the things we're investing in not function the way that they're supposed to. Within 2 years, 17, and within the last 5, we will have basically the entirety of all of our networking devices gone. We will be looking at a system that does not function and does not provide the service for which we are paying. More importantly, we also have the wonderful topic of projectors and accessories, as we were talking about before with smartboards. These are also a category that are directly tied to instruction. This is the tool that the teachers use that has basically transformed the chalkboard into a surface that belongs to both the student and also to the teacher. Have we got a perfect solution for training with that yet? No. And a big portion of that is because when they were put into the rooms, there wasn't the training there to make that happen. You can bet that when we move forward with additional tools, that is not going to be the way that this goes. At the very least, oh, my goodness, did that really not go in there? Okay, well, I can tell you off the top of my head. We had 17, 18, 29. We're looking at 69, about 68 to 70 devices that fall into this category. Of those, we're looking at replacement within 2 years of 50% of them. It's a staggering number of the projectors that we have on our smartboards that are not listed as products by Smart anymore. In fact, they are all discontinued, with the exception being a few of our current models that we have since gotten in the last couple of years. Most of them, we've either purchased old models or we have purchased models that are going to become so very quickly because they were cheaper at the time.
So last year, wasn't it last year, we purchased a bunch of smart boards?
We did.
And those are actually in good condition, and they will continue to be used?
So those are
Absolutely.
the old ones?
No.
No, they're the good ones.
Yes.
Okay.
We're specifically talking mostly about the projectors that are attached to these. The boards themselves are useful for a long period of time. Those are not something we're going to have to likely replace for years to come yet, for sure. The projectors that are attached to them, though, are very expensive. If you go with the brand that Smart themselves produce, you're looking at thousands of dollars in each case. That is an extremely expensive investment for something that we really could be doing a lot more effectively. Epson has an interactive whiteboard, for instance, that's half of that. We also, Sony has been experimenting with a projector that is actually only $1,000 to $1,200 that can sit on a table and be switching between projecting images onto the table, onto the wall, and it weighs about as much as these two iPads together. It's a remarkable technology, and I'm really hoping that that will be something that will take off in the next 2 to 3 years, so that by the time we get to the end of this window, we can start making a shift to something that's more interactive and more flexible, and can be wherever we want the instruction to be. The tools that we have, though, we will absolutely make the most use of, and the smartboards that we have continue to be very valuable tools. The only question is, do we continue to invest in that, or do we continue to invest in something that will ultimately be less expensive over time? I hope that the answer is relatively self-explanatory. The next one I'd like to talk about is tablets. And this is something that's kind of a hard topic to bring up because of the implications of what happened around this. We have 40 devices right now in the school. And despite these being some of the most amazing tools you can possibly imagine, we can have situations here, for example, if hopefully most of you can see this. This is a stand called Osmo. This is a really cool tool that allows this iPad to be an interactive tool with things that are put down on the table in front of it. I can put down pens, I can put down blocks, I can put down all sorts of other things, and the software on the iPad that is $0 after we purchase the Osmo kit allow for collaboration between students. It creates a space that's fun to do math. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to do problem solving and reasoning and live problem solving in a way that is also making students better learners. And that's something that's really hard to find. This is also a great tool for people who have a need to practice handwriting. With a $2 stylus, I can get people on here and they can start practicing handwriting to the point where they will be able to improve their skills with that. And it's in a way that's a lot more interesting than using a pen and paper, which frankly, when we're talking about trying to compete with some of the media that exists today, that is a pretty tall order for a lot of our kids to be interested in. This and this help to make that happen. The problem with the 40 iPads that we purchased is that nobody really quite did the research to look into who we were purchasing them from. Apple has an unfortunate policy that every 5 years after releasing a product, they discontinue it. They do not support it. It becomes a dinosaur that they put into what's called legacy. Once that hits, that is it. I can't update that iPad anymore. That is as far as it goes. Software, the programs and tools that people are learning with, the things that this runs, those continue to advance. The tools inside of this are not advancing. This doesn't magically become better because I want it to be. And unfortunately, Apple has the decision that that is as far as we can go with this. We cannot update this product anymore and continue to deliver this as a service that's useful to a user. So as a consequence, we have all these great programs like Seesaw that we're using to try to communicate with people in the community, to bring the community closer together, that we can't do because these devices don't exist and because we don't have enough of them, even if they did, in the classrooms to make a difference. But that is basically useful for this purpose now. By using it with this, it gets a second life. But that leaves a pretty big void because now suddenly we're talking about 40 iPads that don't exist. And we're looking for ways as to how we can bring that service back to our teachers because these tools are really magical and we don't have a way to bring them in. We have a tremendous number of people at the K level through second who are hoping for something like this, even a couple in their classroom. And you can see that in some of the testimonials we'll get to in a few minutes because it really breathes through how much of an impact these make for learning. And you can see right here what that means. That's a huge initial expense if we're going to replace those. Or the option is we have years without them. And that means that we have years of students who don't get that instruction. And that's a problem. That's basically the big picture for what we're talking about with Highgate. And I apologize for it being a little somber, but I'm hoping that that will help to kind of highlight why this is important to talk about here tonight. Basically, what I'm wanting to do is to improve the way we're doing inventory, to make better plans and to make better systems going forward. So the goals of this, first off, is to develop a meaningful equipment life cycle plan. That means that we need to have standards for when something becomes too old. And it can't be, it still turns on. If that's the solution, we're going to have these emergency problems when things don't turn on one day, or when the cost of keeping it turning on costs more than replacing it. Those are realities for a lot of the equipment that we have right now. Big picture, 28% of all the technology at this school, including cords, all the way up to the infrastructure at the school level that is running our network, 28% of it needs to be replaced within the next year. Within 1 to 2 years, we're at 38%. We are within 50.4% after 5 years. If we don't make a change to this budget, we are going to not have anything here. It will be like we stuck back into the 1950s. And at that point, the students who are here, who are competing with other peers who have these tools at their disposal, are going to be at a tremendous disadvantage when they get to the high school, where they're expected to have had that experience. What I would also like to do at the very bottom here, I apologize for jumping ahead, is also to come up with a goal for how to retire obsolete equipment in a way that does not feel like we're just taking this stuff and throwing it out, because that is also not acceptable. These are investments that we need to consider how we can use them for. Just because they're not useful here as an educational tool doesn't mean they're not useful. And what I would like to talk to you about is how we can use that to help benefit the community. But the way we do that is by coming up with plans for selecting products that are going to be long-term effective solutions. And that means talking about strategy, that means talking about how we're going to evaluate whether these tools are working for us or not. That means we have to come up with a way to execute our plan, put it into action, train our personnel, and make sure that people know what they're doing with them, so that we're getting the most out of every minute that we have with those for 5 years. But finally, it comes down to, at the end of that cycle, looking at it authentically and genuinely and saying, is this something that, based on the research we've collected, that we can continue to use? Or is this something that we need to get rid of because it's going to cost us more to keep using it? And this system, this management strategy is something that will help us to get there. One of the things that is part of it is looking at all of the different things authentically as to what might cause us to stop using these programs and these tools and have to retire them. Things like the fact that sometimes it literally requires hiring a computer engineer to actually design programs to allow us to continue using. Or the cost to hire these people is not insignificant. The cost to renew licenses for software that we've had for 15 years. It might be more expensive to continue doing that than to purchase something else that's coming down that maybe has a option to purchase individual licenses for students so we can target specific learning needs. We need to talk about how we can maybe retire them if the performance is not able to actually keep up with it. Because if it makes it so we can't use the tool with the other tools we have, it doesn't do anything. It's literally a paperweight at that stage. More importantly, there's also factors, rare though it may be, that the tools we have are considered an environmental problem. There are things that are released that have unsafe materials in them. Extremely rare. But if that happens, it's not okay to continue to have that in our school. More importantly though, and this is the really big one, maintenance costs. If it costs me more to keep the roof on than to make one fix and deal with it, that's something we need to consider. I know as an example, the school here has recently had to make several investments in improving and repairing its roof. There gets to a point, especially with technology, that if we continue doing this dance of hoping that things are going to continue to work, trying to make things pan together here, and fake like things are all hunky-dory, that eventually those maintenance costs might not be a big deal. The problem is those maintenance costs don't go away. They usually get bigger the older and older something gets. Eventually, it's cheaper to just get a new one. Finally, we need to make sure that when what we're purchasing is not something that consumes another product. For example, printers that have print cartridges that are 30 years old and no longer produced. If we continue running those sorts of machines, that's an expensive tool that suddenly is no longer something we can use. The big picture, though, is we can also make better decisions around how we're replacing these tools. And that comes back to, what does it look like for what a classroom should have? The answer, the teacher should have a Chromebook. They do not need a computer this powerful unless they have a smartboard. And the short version is that is something that will continue to go away. Those will eventually be phased out. But I would also add to that when they get that, there is no reason why we should be purchasing expensive document cameras when an iPad serves this purpose and a multitude of other purposes. I can also use this with this. Suddenly, I can make my class able to go wherever you want. This costs $17, that's it. And there are models that are a lot cheaper than this that are literally made out of cardboard that Google produces that are available for up to as little as $12 each. You purchase a set of these for the school, one class set. You can have your classrooms taking field trips to walk around the Parthenon. You can take them to go to museums in other parts of the country, and they can walk around and see things that they will never otherwise get to see. Talk about opening some eyes and providing some opportunities. This sort of tool is enabled with tools like this. But without tools like this, teachers can't use Seesaw, they can't use a variety of the best technology that we have, and they also certainly cannot take advantage of the best stuff that's coming out that is going to continue to get better and continue to make education better for them. Last but not least, an interactive display or a smartboard. That is not something that has to be one or the other. Again, the interactive display is the less expensive option that we will continue to pursue as we move forward. And we'll continue to find solutions that provide that service, as opposed to just looking at finding the easiest solution. We want to find the right solution. Finally, when we are talking about what we need to replace now, we're looking at the priority list right here. Networking hardware is, despite its complicated description, the single most important thing in this school. It is in a lot of ways very, very central to the way that we operate, and it is central to the way that we communicate. If we take that out of the equation, there are a lot of things we can't do and a tremendous number of resources that we have paid good money for that we cannot use. Tablets are another big component of that, because while we've been paying attention to all of the grades 3 through 6 with those one-to-one Chromebooks, K through 2 has been left in the ditch. The tablet does not have to necessarily be one-to-one, but we can certainly provide several to a classroom as time goes on and continue to find ways to help doing that so that the individuals in that classroom have the tools they need to be able to learn as best they can. Computers are something that we also have to address, and I think that's answered by what we just talked about with Chromebooks, because again, we do not need to continue investing in these sorts of tools. I would happily switch out this for a Chromebook if I had one. And the short version is I am not using it at the moment because of a particular situation, but that is another thing to consider. These have direct impacts to the way that we teach, and if we don't have information about what's going on with each of these machines, if we don't have documented background research on how the length of their warranty, on how long they're going to be supported for, on how much it costs, on how much it's worth after several years, we don't know what we have. We're playing dice and we're hoping that we know what the answer is. That is not a way to plan a budget. Again, my strategy going forward is to do very documented and thorough research and to develop systems that will be able to transfer from me to anybody else who ever may take this position now, in the future, or anytime. Because this needs to be a transferable system that is similar enough that people can pick it up no matter what's going on. And coming into it without having any of this information was a very big challenge that I'm hoping will lead to the realization that that's something we can't allow to happen again. This ultimately gets to the real big meat here. Having inventory tracking systems in place, having better replacement policies for when we're retiring machines, and all of that will allow us to make better decisions that prevent emergency payments, that allow us to know in advance that those things need to be done. And that finally gets back to this question that I keep talking about with what are we doing with the old stuff? What I like to talk about is the opportunity that we have in front of us. We have a lot of tools. We have a lot of tools that don't need to be here, that don't provide a service here, but do and can provide services to the people of Highgate who don't necessarily always have the resources to purchase expensive computers. So there are kids at home who don't have these tools, whereas their peers maybe a couple streets down do, and that's a really big difference. You can it's the same thing in a lot of ways. If you think about computer literacy as a very good similarity to what you might see with reading literacy, they are becoming as important, because if you don't have the technical literacy to talk about this, you're going to be very, 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 very hard put to be successful in the world that's coming to our kids. Last but not least here, it's a very simple solution. At the end of the 5-year plan for a device, if it's, for example, assigned to a teacher, that teacher has the option to purchase it for, say, $25. That money goes back into the pot to help purchase supplies the next year. If they don't want it, what it will instead go into is the Tech for Thunderbirds program, which you'll see on the third to last page of the handouts that I gave to you all. Basically what it identifies is a policy for how we can get these tools to those kids. Very easy, and we can certainly talk about amending this and fine-tuning it. But if a computer is not purchased by a staff member, we still need to find a home for it. We can repurpose it, install a free operating system on it, give a student a quick 2-hour tutorial or less on how to maintain their own computer, and then they get to walk away with it. Parents can apply for it very easily. We can provide all those tools to them so that these tools are continuing to be useful. And that, I guarantee you, is going to provide a lot of opportunity for kids in this area that they don't necessarily have now. Prime example of the computers we have, again, keep in mind about 120 or so are all going to become available for that purpose in the next year alone. So that's a lot of computers that we could have by the winter of 2018 to be a really great Christmas gift for somebody. Looking forward, this basically gets back to one really big thing: community engagement. If we can make some of these changes, if we can make these steps now, if we can get ahead of this and not make this a third seat priority, this is going to pay dividends. This is something that will allow us to step forward with the tools that our teachers need. It will allow them to make some really incredible opportunities for our kids happen. And most importantly, it's going to pave the way for better decision making. Because if we don't make this the priority, if we go with the check the engine light ignore the engine light option, we're going to find that we're perpetually playing catch up. And that is a lot of problems for everybody, because that's when you have things that crop up that you're not expecting. That's when you have old machines that you can't afford to replace for year after year after year after year after year. And that's when you end up with teachers who have 10-year-old computers. We can do better than this, and I guarantee you going forward that we will. Just to give you some ideas of what some of the teachers here are also saying around this. We've had a number who wanted to be here, but because of parent-teacher conferences and everything tonight, that wasn't really an option. Big picture, though, you see a lot of comments around, for example, from Lynn Hansen. We really have the need for and would utilize a smartboard in the Success Lab. There are now 6 instructors in there, seeing well over 50 students per day. We also have meetings in the Success Lab, and without access to a smartboard, not only are we at a disadvantage with professional staff, but our students are also at a disadvantage. Let me say that part again. Our students are also at a disadvantage. We have asked for a smartboard in the past, but I've been turned down. Our room is as much a classroom as any other at HES. We feel we should have equal access to technology. Here's one from Claire Dici, first grade teacher. If I had better access to the computers, I would have had students reading magazines and books online. Students could read and listen online using free apps that are available to enrich their learning. I would get more students onto Osmo more often. I would do more projects that include stop motion and the green screen. I would like to do some research projects with my kiddos, but the internet is slow enough that we can't even consider that. I want to use an online blog for my kids to get students used to working comfortably online, so they can make smart decisions in that space. I really want iPads in my classroom to do more projects with Seesaw. Computers are motivating for students. I wish I could hear your presentation tomorrow. Good luck. Corinne LaBounty. And also Corinne Dyke for 3rd grade teachers. I would love 1 or 2 iPads for the classroom to use with Seesaw. I could get so much more contact with parents and keep them involved. The Chromebooks are great for learning, but they are challenging tools to take pictures with. This can mean a lost class time, and the internet reliability is a big problem as well. Luann Collins. Now that I am using Seesaw more frequently, I would love iPads that could keep in my room for when students have sparks or when we have an authentic moment. Those moments get lost, and parents miss so much because we lack the tools to share with them what their kids are doing. Leslie Byrne, our art teacher who uses this very room. I would love to be as up to date as the classroom teachers, regardless of what technology goals are. It would be nice to be able to use the same equipment rather than always getting hand-me-downs from years ago. I am ready and eager to learn how to use tools like smartboards or Apple TVs, but cannot. I would love to have like 4 or so iPads for students to use during my art classes, for artist and cultural research, as well as to have them available when students need to look at an image in order to include more accurate details in their own work, or even design digital artwork. Our students are behind in art design and will not be in the same league as artists who have had these tools. Just to kind of close up with a few others, the big picture you can see here. Prime example, Craig Alleward, who's our PBIS and homeschool coordinator. Well, I would love to add an actual computer that does not need to be a Mac to my wish list. Currently, he's using a hand-me-down old netbook that we had to give him because we don't have a tool for him. Devices do Seesaw correctly would be a huge difference in our daily instruction. iPads are staples in most classrooms. I would like to use Seesaw the way it is intended instead of as a message system. Without an iPad, that is hard to do. And you can see we have all kinds of enthusiasm from Rebecca Belrose, our 4th grade teacher. And most notably, I've mentioned a few times Katie Fowler. I won't read the whole thing here for you, but I'm going to leave this up just as we're continuing our conversation for you to think about if you're finding that the questions are not necessarily to your liking, or if you'd like some further information. It's a little small and hard to read, but I think it gets to the heart of a lot of what we could be seeing. because there are some unbelievably amazing tools that do not and have never existed before that are available for really affordable prices to our kids that will change their futures. Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan.
Questions?
I have a question on the network and
Sure.
the server. So every teacher who has a Chromebook, are those automatically backed up on the server? All
Yes.
their information is?
Instantly. Everything actually functions in what's called the cloud.
Okay.
Basically, everything they do, whenever they type it, when I type that key, it is instantly saved online. They don't have to worry about a thing.
Okay, great.
That's part of why it's such a great savings, because it doesn't need to have all the horsepower of this laptop. It does everything out there.
Mhm. So their MacBooks or whatever they're using, the only thing stored on there is the software.
Precisely.
So, as Mr. Raynack, do we as an SU coordinate the types of technology that we purchase so that when kids do go to NBU, they have experience with what they're going to be using down there?
Unfortunately, we do not, and that creates a lot of problems that can lead to students not having had the same experiences. At the end of the day, if you have put two students in the same classroom, one who had a tool like this their whole life and one who didn't, and ask them to do the same task, it would be a very tall order, in my opinion, to ask them to do that.
I would chime in for a second too, Ethan, as well. And across the board, all of our schools using Chromebooks. That's a staple in the classroom now, the one-to-one environment. That's consistent across the board. And I think what you're asking about is other options as well within the schools. It's pocketed. So what I mean by that is at Highgate this year, we're programming drones within our school and having kids be aware of coding literacy with that elective in 5th, 6th grade. Other schools may be using 3D printers and other resources, but every school right now has the passion to get our kids up to speed, but it's all different strategies and it's different technologies. So when they're going to the high school level, middle school level, and MBU, it's a very eclectic background they have. So there is no streamlined process of, we'll call it computer science or just technology. The vision is there, but it's not streamlined. So when I get there, again, it's a different backgrounds.
So I think you've kind of answered this next question. So what would it look like? How would it be different? I think you've just answered this. If we did have an SU plan that everybody followed.
Unfortunately, I'm not really able to speak to that because I'm not the one making those decisions, but I could say hypothetically that if we did have more consistency, it would be a way to prepare students a little bit more consistently so that the objectives that we have at that level could be pushed a little bit more finely, and students who maybe are more advanced wouldn't become bored. Students who are maybe behind wouldn't be feeling overwhelmed.
Is there a computer SU-wide curriculum for computers and technology?
No, there's not.
There's no.
Okay. And then my last question is, Ethan, you said that if kids don't have some technology for years, that it means that that you said years they don't get the instruction if we don't replace iPads. So kids aren't getting instruction if they don't have iPads?
Not exactly. What I mean, what I meant by saying that is that they are not able to get the same types of experiences. These are tools that allow certain types of instruction that you cannot replicate with other tools. It's unique to that type of thing. That's why they're
Okay.
purchased. So in the same way as we could potentially train a student to use a paintbrush as opposed to a pencil, I mean, they're for different purposes. They serve, they're two tools that look similar but ultimately provide a very different experience to the project that the person is undertaking. When we're talking about education, this is not just a paintbrush, this is also a series of other tools as well. This is your pencil, this is your This is your portrait gallery. This is everything. So this is a humongously expansive tool, whereas without it, you have a much more limited number of resources. Prime example, this one costs a $320 for a brand new top-of-the-line iPad coming out from Apple right now. That will last you 5 years before you have to do a thing with it. The best part about it is as you're using it, apps and purchases can be transferred from one device to another very, very quickly. And those software apps that have really great, rigorous educational content to it can be as inexpensive as free. They can range up to a couple of dollars. Most are not more than 20. That's a pretty huge amount of customization and targeted education that you can give that without that type of device is not an option.
And my last question is, do we have parents in our school who are concerned about having too much computer and technology use?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't taken any of those phone calls.
For what it's worth, as a general statement, I can actually add to that that most people think that moderation in this is a wise thing, and I do as well. I'm not advocating for all tech all the time when I say that we need to invest in this, but more to the point of saying we need to have the tools there so that they can responsibly learn to use them. If we just hand somebody an iPad and say, go ahead and have fun, watch YouTube for 14 hours, they will. But if you use it as an instructional device and you think about how you can target instruction with it, and you train staff to target them, you can turn it into a tool that makes learning and thinking better.
Thank you. So, how much of what you have showed us is not in this?
Like I said, a good portion of this presentation was not, and I apologize for that. It was simply a lack of time on my part.
But don't
But
apologize, that's okay.
I can definitely provide a copy of this.
That'd be great.
If that would be helpful. Sure.
Well, for number one, we have a school board member who's not here
Sure, absolutely.
and didn't hear it. And number two, I would like one.
Absolutely. No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much for your time. Very
Ethan
much
and Mike, I
appreciated.
would like to personally, as a school and as a supervisory union, thank you for your diligent research. I had a chance to see this earlier. I'm sorry I missed the first part. I was playing hooky. Dave, I was late.
I know,
Second
I
time.
know.
Okay. So 3 times and you're out, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
planned
Yeah, but
June
this one
30 to
must-
be my 3rd time.
But this one must have been really good because it left you speechless, and I wish I had been there.
It doesn't happen often.
I know, that's why I wish I was there.
And then I shared a couple things.
Oh, okay. Well,
I do have one question. Back in maybe March or April, we saw a presentation by George Rainac. I think we were in Sheldon. Oh, it's Franklin? Okay. And I guess I sort of thought that was some kind of technology curriculum. I remember, I don't have my notes, but I remember like this year kids were going to be learning about digital citizenship.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and that's the one common thread amongst our schools. When we established towards the end of last year as an SU tech team, was establishing a digital citizen curriculum that was implemented across our school for sure in the K6, actually, 2 through 6, and it was, I can't speak to other schools, we talked about it as an SU team. And
He presented it to the SU board,
Yes.
so I took it as a top-down thing.
Sure. And I would 95% say that that happened across the board. I can only speak to how it's implemented on our grounds here.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's the one common thread we have.
And we're doing some of that now.
Yep. So it's a hit the ground running. So it's really strong in the beginning. It's the first 6 weeks kind of mentality. And we go through a series of lessons with all classes, and it gets them all on the same baseline for digital citizenship. Or grade levels.
Good.
That's a good thing to know.
let me speak to this a little bit. You might not be surprised at what I'm going to say. We've had 5 autonomous local districts that in many arenas have done what they think is right, and it's right in every one of the venues. However, it is not consistent across all schools and won't be consistent unless there's some authority given to someone that can oversee all 5 schools with some power to be able to do that. And so I would just ask you, as we come off a week of Act 46, to think about how we can do that, whether we do it decentralized or centralized, to be able to have the authority to have that consistent conversation and that consistent implementation in all schools. So we can say that we can do it decentralized, and maybe we can, but it's going to take some concerted effort and agreement with folks that have power and authority in their schools to be able to come together. And the question is around the inducement to do that.
Is it best for kids?
I think it is, as evidence from what's
Then
been
there's
said
all the
tonight.
authority in the world.
Okay.
If it's what's best for our kids, and we ought to be doing it, and there's no choice here,
Okay. So the supervisory
in my
union,
humble opinion.
the supervisory union board would be the locus of authority where that happens, and how it happens really is up to a plan that gets developed and directed and assessed at the implementation level.
One parting thought just to leave you with. There was an article that I would like to share with you that I think especially connects to opportunities here in Highgate.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is an article here about how drones and technology are being used in, I will get one more.
We'll share.
Okay. Basically, it talks about how technology, like what we're using here at Highgate, is being used to provide more precise farming. It's a tool that allows you to get more precise and better use of your resources. That basically means a better bottom line for farmers. And you can do that by teaching our kids how to use things like drones and how to use computers, because it gives them the information they need to know to develop effective solutions that are going to make those farms more effective. Most people don't get bigger farms much. It only happens if you buy your neighbor out, and that's not the way to go forward. You end up with 4 farms, and if they're all going to be owned by a couple of people, that's a pretty sad state of things. By protecting that, by giving people the skills and the talents that they need in order to do this sort of stuff, I think that that's a pretty solid way to give back to the community and to make sure that the people here understand that we understand what they're going through. My father was one last thought, I promise.
That's okay.
My father, for example, is a dairy nutritionist. He worked with companies and people around the state here all the time. He's been on farms his whole life, and I've been right there with him. I started off as a paraeducator, and I can truthfully say, walking into the school, that I had a lot of really powerful experiences working with, seeing people around this building, and I can tell the passion that people in the area here have for their schools. And I can tell you that this will be something that if we can show them matters, we can build the things that they need in order to make their kids want to stay and come back and be cool farmers. That's something that we can and should be giving the support to.
I think UVM Extension Service or somebody, or the UVM Ag program, there was something in the newspaper a while back
Yep.
about using drones.
Yeah.
They
it
covered
had something to do
I almost
with
thought it
lake.
was in Franklin
Yeah,
County.
Yeah, it was, and it had to do with the phosphorus runoff
Yeah.
and all of that. Yeah. So I guess if I were a parent right now of young children or teenage children, I'd be investing in a drone, and I'd be doing a little flyovers in certain places to make sure that kids were where they said they were. I think that's a pretty good strategy.
But you know what? It just
That's what
seems to
my
me
iPhone's
that the drone technology is ahead of the right and
policies.
the right way and the wrong way to use it. Just like technology, computers, and that stuff. It's ahead of what are the ethics and what are the manners and the rules behind that, because it has potential for being not good.
Absolutely, as does everything. And I think that by interacting with it and by practicing digital citizenship and what it means
That's
to
the
be,
word. Those are
Yeah.
two good words.
that's what it comes down to. We have to teach our kids how to behave online, because
We have to
age
teach
will-
adults how to behave
Sure. Anybody who
Starting
spends
with a
more
big
than a
one.
few minutes on something like Facebook will tell you right quick, there are a lot of people on there who have some pretty hostile and negative things to say. And, you know, if we can teach our kids to maybe look at that in a bit better light, be happier for it.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
You know, I think my mother and father were way ahead of the game, because it seems like every time I wasn't where I was supposed to be, I got home and they automatically knew it. So they might have had a drone up there and I didn't even know it.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have a drone, but they had pretty good ways of finding out.
It's called good old-fashioned surveillance. Thank you, gentlemen. Nicely done.
Okay,
Uh,
Do we have the figures before they go on what it would cost to be able to?
I apologize, I was going to say no. I have that actually on this. I will get a copy of that to everybody. In the meantime,
If you would just send that to Pat and me
yes.
right now, that would
You
be
got it.
great, because who knows what kind of conversation might come up.
We put in some figures
Okay.
to get started, so.
And I'll tell you, when I came in here tonight and saw the cars and forgot that it was parent conferences, I thought they were coming to see Ethan's and Mike's presentation and coming to be spectators at the school board.
I would be so lucky. That'd be fun.
And then I remembered.
we've had our big crowd.
Well, I thought maybe they were getting, it was habitual and they were coming again.
Oh, that would be nice.
Yeah.
It would.
Okay, the business report. The roof repair update, and Chris had something to talk about, and I know you do too, Win.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that we did the repair. It didn't work. It worked on part of it, but 2 weeks later, the roof is leaking again. It leaked on the fire alarm. I'm working with Terry on ways to prevent that from happening again from the fire alarm standpoint. We need to fix the roof. What I've directed Terry to do is to work with the contractor that did the initial fix, go back and get it right. It may cost us some more money. He's going to do something different. We need to get it done before winter, because we can't have that roof leaking during the winter. It's a short-term fix. We knew last year when we invested $3,000 in it, it was a short-term fix, and that's what we're going to continue to do until we do something that's substantial to be able to correct the problem. So I just want you to know that that's where we are. If that doesn't work, we may have to do something different.
Speaking of substantial, I have reached out to somebody named Kyle Young. He owns Black River, I believe it's Black River Builders. He's out of Albany, Vermont.
Yeah.
He does a lot of standing seam roofs,
Okay.
and he does a lot for schools.
Beautiful.
I showed him our school and asked him if he'd be willing to come this far, because he says he likes to stay within an hour.
Yeah.
It's a little farther than that.
Tell them to drive fast.
Well, he's got a big
Okay.
Ford diesel, so he might be able to. But he said he'd be willing to look at it. He said the best way to come up with an appropriate estimate for a permanent fix is he wants to come up, pull one pan, see how it was installed wrong, because obviously if it's leaking, it was installed wrong from the get-go. And he said he could put together a proposal from that.
Let's do it.
So I can reach out again and see if he's willing. It's obviously this isn't something we can have done before winter. This is a permanent fix, but we got to find out how much the permanent fix is going to cost.
Might he also have suggestions about a temporary one as well?
He might, but the problem is I know for a fact he's already booked for the year. So to get him before winter would be just about impossible.
Well, we would have a level of expertise looking at it, knowing
Yeah.
what.
That's right.
What the.
And maybe he could recommend something that would be the short term, that we can have a contractor that does have availability do it.
I don't disagree, but at the same time I find it like through the conversation with him without actually pulling it apart, it's going to be difficult to know exactly what's wrong. It's one of those things until you look underneath, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
And the good thing about pulling one pan, he would be able to see how much damage is underneath also.
Yeah, that's true.
Because when we replaced all the metal 10 years ago or more, they also put new sheathing down, which was OSB, right?
I believe
That was
so.
on the old building. right?
Yeah, but that's where our leaks
Yeah,
are.
right. Yeah, I was just clarifying.
So
For me.
OSB does not like water, so chances are that's gonna have to get replaced too, so.
Or it's leaking.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But I talked to him about doing, obviously, the chances of doing the entire roof is unlikely because of, we're trying to do the parking lot too.
Yeah.
So I talked to him about would it be possible to pull just the valleys, all the metal where the valleys are, redo the valleys. He said, oh yeah, you can redo that. He has all of his own, metal benders and all that stuff, so this isn't and he does a lot of schools, so if you wanted to check his references, and he's actually looked at our roof with Ian when we called Ian for last year for the repair. Kyle's the one Ian called to ask advice about it. So.
Okay. Okay.
Should be all set.
Got it.
Thank you again.
Parking lot update.
So I just want to come to closure here on what we need to do. So do the investigation.
Yeah, I can get him to come up, take a look.
I guess what I'd like to hear from the board is if he has a short-term recommendation on how to do a fix that would take us through the winter, is the board okay with moving forward if we can make that happen?
Yeah.
I think I think we'll pass that responsibility on to the buildings and grounds, +1.
Okay.
And if they think, between the meeting of the minds, of all the minds, if you guys can come up with what looks to be what we ought to do, then I don't have a problem agreeing, giving you guys the authority to do that. But it should be in the minutes,
Yep.
if that's what we want to do.
You want to put a money
But
cap on it?
What happened with the guy that was here last month?
It leaks. He fixed it. One fixed. One's leaking still.
Didn't work.
So one was fixed and one wasn't fixed?
No, they both leak.
Oh, they both
Oh, they both
sides.
ended up leaking.
Yeah.
I happened to be here that day, and I was very surprised that Terry was not here when they were here. So I'm curious if they fixed the right stuff.
I mean, I don't know.
Well,
I was here
Unfortunately,
that day,
Terry's
too.
entitled to his time off, so I mean, I can't.
It is. I guess I'm thinking though that was a couple $1,000s, wasn't it?
it was four.
Oh, five.
Five
Just shy of
thousand.
The
five.
cap was 5.
I guess I was just thinking that if you're gonna have people come to fix the roof,
But I think,
you ought to schedule it at a time when you're here.
but I think he had something serious going on or something. That's why.
Well, regardless, but I do think Nola raises a good point, okay? When someone's coming to work on our buildings, there needs to be someone who's knowledgeable about the buildings to be here to oversee the work, or to at least eyeball it,
And I would
or
say
answer questions.
Randy was here, and I think that Randy would probably have the knowledge base, except had no copy of the quote or was asking me, and I'm like, I didn't pay that good attention. I didn't read the quote. I didn't know. I was like, I have no idea what they're supposed to do. And I, felt like I was seriously lacking information at that point. But I also felt like it wasn't necessarily my place to have that information. I'm not on the Buildings and Grounds Committee, and I don't know about roofs. Other than they're required.
Well, see,
That's not good when they're leaking.
that actually brings up a good point. That has kind of been something that's bugged the crap out of me since I've been asked to be on the Buildings and Grounds and whatnot. Is there's too many people involved in it. Because what happens is Terry will call me and ask me a question, and he'll call Dave and ask a question, then Wynn will get involved and answer a question, then Richard answers a question. There's just too many people being asked questions in too many directions. I didn't even know there was a quote for the roof. I mean, and I'm on Buildings and Grounds. I'm looking into getting the roof repaired. I don't know what Richard's looking into. I mean, there's just no, I don't know.
No chain of command, and I agree.
Yes, you're
And
right.
the only reason I moved forward on this is snow's coming, the roof leaked, and I felt like you wanted it to get done. I did it. I'm sorry I didn't communicate with everybody about it. I worked directly with Terry, and I'm happy to do whatever you'd like me to do.
My point is, I think if we're going to have Terry be in charge of the building, we need to let him be in charge of the building. I mean, I've talked to him a few times, and a lot of times it feels like he feels that his involvement is being superseded and whatnot. And if we want him to be in charge of the building, let's put him in charge of the building. Have him make the calls, have him be here when they're doing the work and schedule things and whatnot. I just, that's how I feel it has to be done. Because he is the one person here every day. I'm not here every day. I am here a couple times a week at the most. So I just think Terry needs to be in charge of it.
I am in agreement with a plan like that too. That one person, you know, if that's their position is to be in charge of the building, they should, and they should be you know, like that day I was here, I don't know, contact them, you know, call somebody else, but don't call me.
Or me.
But I agree with that.
I do too.
With a plan like that, or line of thinking, whatever you want to call it, I think that needs to be the way we move forward. If we put someone in a position, a management position, then that's what they should be doing.
When do you think that guy could come down and pull that pan?
I don't know. This is a very tough time of year. I mean,
Yeah.
And that may be why Terry wasn't here. That might have been the only day Billadu could have come. I mean,
don't know.
schedule it.
I think
I
it
can
was 2
sympathize
days.
because trying to schedule right now is
Crazy.
like trying to pull your hair
Well,
out.
and that's what Randy was asking me. He says, "Oh, well, you know, they're here today, and they could seal some more." And I said, "Well, I don't know what they're supposed to do." And he's telling me about a vent on this side of the building that's falling in, and it needs more sealing. And I said, I really don't know what to tell you because I don't know what they're supposed to be here doing. I don't know if they've exhausted the quote that they were supposed to give us. It was kind of he said, he goes, "Oh, well, they probably won't be able to come back for a few more weeks and do that." And I don't know what to tell you.
As far as getting Kyle here, I mean, to be honest with you, I talked to him at the beginning of the week. So I didn't talk about timelines because I hadn't had a chance. I knew we had a board meeting this week, so I was waiting to see what everybody else wanted to do.
We can't expect a contractor to react with urgency after it's been leaking for
A while.
I mean, it's not their issue.
It's true.
Okay.
I mean, this time of year, any contractors running around just trying to get things done before
Especially
snow
when it
flies.
was nice for so long and then all of a sudden, boom, it's here.
Yeah.
So it's created that.
But the best I can do is I'll give them a phone call and I'll keep you in the loop. I'll send you an email and whatnot when I know. But I know he's working 7 days a week, trying to keep up. So
And of course, removing a pan, you can't, like you said, told me, that you can't reuse the pan, you gotta put it in there.
yeah, I mean he has to bring a guy and some tools and him and another guy because they're gonna once you remove a pan, it's garbage.
When you say pan, are you talking the valley?
No, a pan is each section. They're called
Oh,
pans.
I got it.
Of the standing seam.
Got it. Okay.
Because they're rolled into a pan.
Yeah.
That's why they call them pans, and then they're crimped over. And once you crimp them over,
I just want to make sure everybody knows what you're talking about here.
basically they're pulling one sheet of tin off.
Yeah.
And then they'll be able to tell everything from that.
Okay.
I mean, obviously they're not going to pull the biggest one. They're going to try to find one strategically placed and whatnot.
So I guess I'm looking for some direction from the board in the form of a formal motion to be able to direct the Building and Grounds Committee to do their thing.
I think they're looking to direct Terry.
Okay, to Terry.
Can I ask a question about your capital reserve funds? You have, the funds that are in there are earmarked in your minds pretty solidly on parking lot.
Is that a question or a statement?
It's a question.
I thought we were pursuing other avenues for parking lot. Because that's, in my mind, and when I was talking to Kyle about it, I was thinking if this repair could be under a certain dollar amount, maybe we could not have to go to a bond, maybe we could use our capital reserve for this repair. I mean, to replace all the metal on every valley, it's a lot of money. So I don't know if we'd be able to do it for what we have in our capital reserve. That's why I want to start getting prices.
How much do we have?
$100,000.
Okay.
Which, I mean, $100,000 is a lot of money, but
Not when you're talking roof,
not with that
commercial
many
roofs.
valleys
Yeah.
either. I mean, we have valleys on valleys with valleys in them, and it's just, there's a lot of work there.
Right, and we also don't have the adequate pitch for a standing seam roof. We're at 2.5, 12, and I think it's got to be 4 in order for water to flow the right way. So it's more than just the tin and the seals, it's also the slope.
And anything that's underneath that's an issue.
Right.
From the water.
Well, the slope we can't fix for 100,000.
I agree.
There's just no way.
Yeah,
So we got to work with what we got.
yep.
I also told him about how the flashing leaks along the brick, and he knew a solution for that. And so,
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're thinking about, keep reminding you that there is money in the capital reserve,
Yeah, well-
and it's not too late necessarily to go to the voters and ask for something. It is too late for a bond, but you
Yes.
still have time to, if in an emergent situation, we could make that happen. So just to remind you of that.
And our parking lot's not gonna be done.
Well, the parking lot doesn't set off the fire alarm.
Absolutely. Or rot all the wood.
Or, yeah, put our kids outside when it happens to be downpouring.
Yeah.
And we'll, gotta do it.
Yeah, if it goes off, they have to go out. But if it goes off because it's raining, it doesn't make any sense. I just want them out there if the building's on fire.
Okay,
I'll make a motion. Boom, boop, toop.
and what is your motion saying?
My motion will say to have the buildings and grounds, go ahead and contact, what's his name again?
Kyle Young.
Kyle Young. And
Is the Buildings and Grounds Group gonna contact Kyle
Well,
Young?
I'd be.
I mean, it makes sense if
I'm
you
more
do
wi-
it, Chris.
I'm more than willing to reach out since I've already reached out once with Black River Builders. I'll reach out to them, and I've already talked to Terry about this, and I told him that I would put those two together and let them organize everything.
that's part of my.
Okay, so, and then, does the rest of the motion want to say if there is a way to fix the roof for this winter where it leaks? And if that is reasonable, the Buildings and Grounds Committee with Terry, you have the authority to approve.
If it's over a certain dollar amount,
Well, that's the next part.
15,000.
okay.
Ask about it then. I'm just concerned about the current financial situation as far as taking it out of your general fund this
Right.
year. The current financial situation is
Leak. Good word.
maybe a little worse.
Dire.
I was
Dire.
gonna say dire.
And we've had several unanticipated things come up, so I'm just concerned about that.
It sounds like our other reserve fund is the way to go.
I think at this point, and then if we see at the end of the year that we're in a different place, when we get closer to the end of the year, then we can reevaluate that and shift some funds. But I think at this point, probably if we do something, we should probably come from there.
So we're gonna have two motions then. We're gonna have one motion to authorize the Buildings and Grounds Committee with Terry to explore a temporary solution. And then we.
A permanent solution.
Well,
Maybe both.
He's gonna come and give a quote on a permanent solution.
okay. Well, then there's nothing to approve with that, is there? If he comes and does it?
I was just bringing the information to the board.
No, but then we still, so what are we gonna do from now until when we have a permanent solution?
Well, we're gonna have to have a temporary fix.
Right.
And I don't know if, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I reached out this week. So I don't know if I can have him here quick enough where he can give us advice on a temporary solution
Okay.
or not.
Okay. So then that begs the question, do we want the person who has attempted to fix it already to attempt again to fix it?
I don't think so, not without direction. I think you need direction first. He didn't get it done the first time. If he had direction, maybe, because what you're doing is we can't have the person that has the direction, but we could have someone that fulfills that.
And I don't know for sure he can't do it. I know he told me he's
Okay.
booked for the year. Now, whether he has a little bit of wiggle room in that, I don't know. But
Well, if he gets back to Chris really fast, even though he's working 7 days a week, I'm not opposed to having an emergency meeting to make a decision on funds like that.
Sure.
Okay. I will
Rather
reach
than
out.
try to create motions to predict
Right.
the future, we could just say we need to have a meeting to make a
No,
decision on it.
that's a good idea, no.
All right, I'm gonna have you think about a possible amendment, and I would think that if it can be done on the short term less than 15,000, you could give direction to the committee to do that. If it's more than 15,000, you could come back and have an emergency board meeting to make that decision. I'm just thinking about preserving your time and your efforts in this. You can direct this with enough structure to be able to make that happen.
And the temperature's gonna be 16 tomorrow,
Yeah.
so winter's here. That's-
Right.
Timeliness is obviously
Be
an
back in the
issue
40s by next Thursday.
Yeah,
for a while.
you never
At
know.
least a day.
Here's what I have for a motion so far. Direct Buildings and Grounds Committee to reach out to Black River Builders, alias Chris, to analyze the roof fix problem and if possible to repair the leaking roof problem before it snows, and to make an estimate for a long-term solution. And the next sentence is use the capital reserve fund to pay for the repair, the short-term repair.
So if that is an expensive, if the capital reserve, if the short-term solution is over, I think we do need a special meeting to approve that expenditure
15.
because it's coming out of the capital reserve fund as well.
Here's what
It's
you
over
might.
15,000.
If it's over 15,000, we have to solicit 3
Right.
quotes, and we have to go out to, or we have to go out to bid, one or the other.
So I could amend it to say use up to 15,000 in capital reserve fund to pay for the short-term repair. And that way you're delegating your authority to the Buildings and Grounds Committee and Terry, and you're giving them the discretion on that, yet you're still keeping the fiduciary responsibility at the board level.
Do you want your motion
I would
amended
just-
to read that way?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing.
Okay, a second is in order.
I'll second
Are you ready to vote?
Yes.
Do you want to hear the motion again?
Direct the Buildings and Grounds Committee to reach out to Black River Builders to analyze the roof fix problem and, if possible, to repair the leaking roof before it snows and to make an estimate for a long-term solution. Use up to 15,000 in reserve fund to pay for the short-term repair.
You ready to vote? Are you happy with that? You ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
it.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you, that's the kind of direction we need to get her done.
If it goes over, then we'll have a meeting and
Yep.
Well, if a temporary solution goes over 15,000, that's
Well, we can't do it if the temporary
That's a
thing
pretty-
goes over.
that's a,
pretty expensive temporary solution.
yep.
Okay, parking lot project update.
I thought I would hear by now from Regional Planning Commission on whether we had the grant. I haven't heard yet, so I think no news is good news. I'm just going to leave it at that. What I will say is, if we receive the grant, I just want you to know what the next steps would be. And that would be for them to come in and analyze your soil to see what your filtration levels are. And that will determine whether or not another grant could install that kind of a system. So that's where we are. That's all I know right now. And the expedience of this is the same as the roof, that they would need to do that before the ground freezes, otherwise they'd have to wait till spring. If they can do their soil samples in the fall, then that means first thing in the spring, they could begin moving forward. And in the meantime, we could write the second grant that would give funding to be able to implement what the model would be. If the soil samples are what they think they are, I will come back to the board before we move forward with anything else. Are you comfortable with that?
I think you should come back to the board with, once you get those results, regardless of what they should I say.
Before they do soil samples?
No, let them do the soil
Okay,
samples.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying, I will.
Okay.
I just don't want there to be any surprises, and they're out there digging little gopher holes, and you don't know anything about it. That's what it is. They'll do perk tests is what it is.
Well, as long as they check with our buildings supervisor, Gary, and he knows what's going on.
They're gonna
We're
do,
happy.
I mean, a perk test requires like heavy equipment.
Well, I don't know how they do it.
No, soil samples, they do core samples.
Yeah, they just do
They
a,
have a funny looking core shovel that they
Yeah.
shove down and they can,
Fill up.
they don't,
That's-
no, they don't
I
do
don't wanna
perk
bring
tests.
a backhoe in here and dig it up the
no,
lawn.
I just wanted you to know what it's like. It doesn't mean it's that heavy equipment.
No.
To be honest with you, I don't know what it is, but I think it's more what Chris
Sounds
is
like a
saying.
perk test. It's not different.
It's a core sample, and they literally take a core shovel, and I think they have to dig a
Twist
little
it.
bit, and then they twist it in the ground, and they
Yeah.
can pull it out, and it pulls a core sample out, and they can see what the different layers are. They do have to do some digging, but it's with a shovel, not with a
Yeah.
excavator.
And it might make another hole in the parking lot, which I don't think is gonna matter too much.
Might
They'll
drain it.
fill it in.
Depends on-
Yeah, maybe don't tell them to keep it open. Maybe the water run in there.
There we go.
We'll do
I
it-
just
we'll
wanna
do it in the
go-
middle of the pond.
I just want to go back and reference what I said, I think, at the last meeting that we'd kind of forgotten about, and that is land that we have known as the Cassidy property, and we'd talked about, at one point, as one of our solutions, pumping water way over to that. And I think we all agreed that that's a long way to pump it. What we didn't talk about very much was about acquiring land that's closer to the school that could create the retention pond. And I just don't want people to forget that, because I have concerns about rain gardens.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And just let you know, I had talked to the landowner that you were talking, that right next door. Be more than willing to come talk to us.
Okay,
Good.
Being a good neighbor and all, and nice guy.
he offered to before.
Yeah. So anytime you want to talk to him,
Yep.
Okay, budget development.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
I got one last little thing for buildings and grounds, and we're all done. Terry started the fence. It's under construction.
I saw
Yay.
that postal digger on the tractor this morning.
his
And I
tractor.
thought- Oh, I just saw I saw a tractor and a postal digger, and I thought, oh, must be working on a fence.
Yeah, we actually lucked out. McEwen's waived their rental fee on the postal digger and is letting us use it.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you, McEwen's.
And also Mr. Shepherd, Chris Shepherd, is donating and waived the rental fee on his tractor.
Ooh,
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd.
yeah.
There
And
was
Mrs.
no rental
Shepherd.
fee, but that's all right.
It's been waived, I told him.
Yep.
Yeah, gotta put the right spin on it.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I waived the rental, property rental, where it's parked.
There's a whole lot of waving going on in Highgate, isn't there?
On my
Very good.
lawn.
All righty.
That's why we pay
Actually, no,
those
it's not.
dollars. Yeah.
No, hush up.
Budget.
But,
Do you have another
hey, moving
copy?
right along, I'm the timekeeper here.
Yeah, well, we're way over.
It's not my fault.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, Pat, why don't you highlight some of the more key points? I've just updated, again, salaries and benefits were last time. I've adjusted them again, and I'll continue to do that in every draft, but really, Pat and I have been working and chatting, and it would be better to spend the time thinking about what he's proposed in this draft.
Yeah, I think, well, along with Ethan's presentation, the biggest bump is in the technology line, which is page 4. Is it page 4?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. So that's a significant increase that does not include a leasing option.
Yeah, I think that's a significant increase.
Um, Yes, I do.
Well, the
Holy
lease their lease is included.
What's
Pardon
that?
me?
The lease is included in the lease line, just not in the equipment line.
Right.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. And that would, as it says, basically go for teacher devices and infrastructure and a new server.
But this is less than his presentation.
What's that?
This is less than his presentation.
I'm not so sure. That's
Well,
what I
his
need
presentation,
to-
the first year said like 52,000.
Yeah.
And then it went down the second year, down
Well, that
to
was
like
option B.
40.
That was option B.
No, that was A. Option B started at 42, then it went to 44, 46, and you ended at like 53,000 in year 5. And option A was high the first year, then it dropped down, then it went up in increments of $2,000 to the
Yes.
5th year.
Okay, you're right. I got them A's. I'm never good with alphabet anyway.
And I'm not sure we can afford that amount. So this was sort of what meets the minimum kind of requirements for infrastructure. If we want to do more, we can, but
Want and can are two different things, though.
yeah. So anyway, so that's, just more of a starting point also, and, you have his presentation. He's going to forward the numbers, but I think that would represent a pretty significant investment back to kind of where it was, I think, when I started, somewhere along the $30,000 line. But again, that was mostly to implement a one-to-one. So, I would hope that we could do a lot with the significant bump that is in there now.
Well, and the lease it would be a 3-year investment, so you're only seeing one payment on a lease in this.
Yeah.
But you'd be actually purchasing another 80-ish
I think we're
units.
probably maybe a year away also from a couple of the things that Ethan was talking about, which were, things heading towards maker spaces and interactive television. A lot of our smart boards are still pretty new. I would certainly want to get more years out of those. So I think some of those things can be put back on the back burner for a year or two. For me, the big thing is the infrastructure, though. Our server and our points, arrow points, access points, arrowheads. Arrowhive.
Now, Pat, I at least knew it was Arrowhive.
Listen, you guys are, this is not my ballpark, but I do know that that's obviously the most important thing, is making sure that they're up and running and that they can be connected, and that kids can do what they need to do and teachers can do. And I would hope with the amount that we have in there now, that would at least get us started for next year, given in light of our current budget situation. I think it's what we probably can afford, I would hope. So those are the big ones for me, to make that switch over to teacher devices, or begin to make the teacher switch over. We do have 3 years of 7 or 8 new Macs that are in circulation that are not that old. I certainly wouldn't want to replace those so quickly. We would stop buying the Macs, which I know is good news. And
I like Ethan.
well,
He should have been.
I told him
Just
you
for
would
that.
like
Just for
the
that.
no Mac. Yeah. So he knew he would be preaching to the choir there. So anyway, so that's that's the biggest piece. The other is trying to reclaim a little bit of the staff training line. And
What page is that on?
this is going to be on page 3, the third one. I think when I started, it was $13,000. We did let it drop to $8,000, and I'd like to bring it back up. I think that, again, we've been talking about it for a couple of years now. I know Marcel had originally put 13,000 in to make a shift to science, and we've really yet to do that. And I think that we have got to get serious about helping kids have more access to science and train our teachers a little bit better.
There is a science curriculum for
There
the
is.
elementary schools?
There is.
And are we using that?
Not equitably and not consistently.
There are there's not really a curriculum. There's standards, just like there's standards for math and for literacy. But there's not a curriculum that's spelled out or anything like that. Like the teachers just open it up and this is what they do.
Oh, I thought there was on the Franklin Northwest site, specifically maybe for 5th and 6th grade.
I can't quote 5th and 6th grade, so I don't know, but I do know that.
Only because I
the
think I looked
units-
at it a few weeks ago to
Okay.
see what 5th and 6th graders were learning in science and saw something about Newton's third law and
So that might be mentioned because it is in the standards, the next gen science standards, so that the district did prioritize those standards and sort of highlight these are the ones that we need to assess, but it doesn't tell teachers how to assess them or what activities to
Okay.
use or anything like that. So the training would be around the implementation of next gen science standards, just like the Common Core for math and for literacy.
so if we were to invest more in science, when would they teach it?
Well, that's a great question. One of the things that I would like to look at is adding some time on to our school day, which is, I get it, it opens up a bigger can of worms in terms of transportation. Because, however,
Yes.
and I will just say that with the number of kids, MBU students that are from Highgate, the middle and high school, which as we know traditionally drops off dramatically after sophomore year when kids start getting a license and getting cars and not riding the bus. We really are letting that small group of people dictate our entire school day, when we begin, when we end. I've explored this a tiny bit with Marshall. I don't know the best way to get kids home, that 30 kids from the high school home that live in disparate parts of the town of Highgate. But it just seems to me that if we actually could add to the school day and make a run at guaranteed opportunity for science every day, that it's a shame that a small number of kids being able to get home dictate to us, when the end of our school day is.
So, do other elementary schools also have this issue with finding time for science instruction?
I'm not sure.
I can say from my experience at Fairfax that it's disproportionately harder at the younger elementary grades. The K-3 teachers talked all the time about how difficult it was to find time for science. I don't know what about those younger grades makes it more difficult. I'm not a lower elementary teacher, but I can say from being there last year that was a pretty strong feeling amongst those teachers. Generally, as you get older, some of the 4th grade and 6th grade here are split up, so science is a subject, or at least taught alongside math, and so a teacher sort of dedicated their day to it, where in those self-contained classrooms, it's the first thing that just goes. And, at Fairfax, it was grades 4 through 6 that were split up, actually, now that I think about it, that were split up by class, 4 and 5 that were split up by class, and grades K through 3 weren't. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the self-contained classroom struggling to find time for science is not surprising to me.
I think there's value in finding out how the other schools in our district handle science education.
I can do that.
Because a granddaughter that I had was getting quite quite frankly, a lot of science and a lot of social studies. And I don't think
She was getting or was not?
was.
Was.
And it appears is now. And I don't think that day is any longer or shorter than ours. So I'd just be interested in knowing
Sure.
that.
Look it up.
I have a three-part question. on
Three
the budget.
parts.
Whoa.
Yes, I do. How's that building working over to the arena for the skates?
It's worth a
Hmm?
I already talked to Terry about
Yeah.
that. It
And
didn't come out of his budget.
didn't come out of his budget?
No, it didn't.
break. It didn't come out of whose budget?
Terry's.
It didn't?
No.
Oh, you thought it did?
I
Was
thought
it a
it did.
gift?
Yeah.
Huh?
Was it a gift?
No, it came out of another line in the budget. But I talked to Terry today. He called me to tell me it did not.
Oh, because we're under the understanding that that building's, how much did that cost anyway?
It was like $700.
Yeah. That came out of out of his maintenance or,
While buildings are out there.
yeah.
Yeah,
No, it didn't.
And you thought that too.
I thought that.
It got clarified
I
today.
don't know what building we're talking
They bought a little shed for storing skates over at the arena.
Is that inside the arena, outside the arena?
The inside,
In the back corner.
all locked up.
I hope it's locked up.
I don't know. Holy mackerel. Should be.
I don't know if it's time while we're talking about budgets, but is it something to seriously consider in the near future? Us coming up with a better storage plan than for our whole school. I
Yes.
mean, we have storage containers and sheds and different
18-wheeler trailers.
things that are storing things, or they're full and stuff is stored outside and damaged, and I'm just curious if it's time for us to figure out a more permanent, bigger space for storage.
I think it's a great idea, but the fear I have with that is, we got to fix the roof, we got to fix the parking lot. The windows in these buildings need to start getting addressed.
Yep.
Building a nice big garage out there to get rid of all them storage containers would be awesome, but
I'm going to suggest we create the 5-year plan by the end of the year, and that's a piece of it, but it's more long-term than it is short-term. And I think it goes hand in hand with the 5-year plan that you heard about tonight. That's a very good way to organize efficient and effective use of resources.
Yeah, we definitely need storage.
Well, and I agree with Chris, we need a roof.
Yeah. We need windows. We need a parking lot.
And I don't think that we want to keep having Lake Highgate. We're going to start getting taxed on waterfront property.
I will just stock it with trucks.
Yeah. Put out a war.
Maybe a marina will generate some income.
Yeah. Moving right along.
Other increase or continuation of the furniture line. I'd like to continue on with that cycle of replacing, 1 or 2 grades, depending on how many classrooms are in the grades. Once we started that at the 3rd grade, each grade that they go to, we are looking to have that type of what they refer to as flexible seating, with different options for kids to sit in class.
So if you do that, are you thinking about you started with 3rd grade?
Yeah.
And you've gone to 4th grade now. Are you next year considering doing 2nd and 5th? Working both ends?
I think, well, if you'll notice, I think the line is overspent this year,
Yes.
I believe, and I think that was in part due to trying to do a 2nd grade level. If you are, and we tried it because it was only 2 classrooms at that grade level, 5th grade, but it's the stuff's expensive. It's not inexpensive to do, and it probably got a little bit more than I wanted to. So So, but I think next year we would probably stick to one grade level, especially if it's going to be a 3-classroom kind of deal.
So you did the 5th grade too then. So 4th and 5th this year, so you have 6th left.
6 left. And
Which
then we
would be 2 classes next year.
Yeah.
And then 2nd, which is probably 3rd, 3 classes, I mean.
Yeah.
Those 5th graders lucky to get new furniture 2 years in a row.
What are we doing? Or, no, don't answer the what are we. I think we need to have a plan in place that does something with the furniture we're taking out of these classrooms. Whether it's, I don't think you should put it in storage unless you really think you're actually going to use it in the future. But if you're replacing it, that's probably not the case. But is it possible that we could have some kind of a auction or a sale to get rid of it rather than throw it out?
It's possible.
I think that needs to be a policy. I think we need to look at, you know, moving stuff along and possibly getting a little out of it.
Well, I think that would be essentially true. I don't know what the market is for, you know, standard kind of 70s, 80s, 90s desks is, but certainly can be explored. But I think it's pretty safe to say that we won't go back to that. So I don't. There's no use for us to keep it. You know, occasionally we might call for a desk, or, you know, we are putting in a bit of a planning room, and, you know, we dug up a couple of old desks with the cubicles. But, you know, other than that, there's no need to keep large supplies of any of the old desks. And on top of that, they were really old. That was one of the problems of not having the replacement cycle, is that everything was old at the same time. So there aren't too many of those. And I think Terry did call some of the desks that were worth holding on to, and I think he just got rid of ones that were not any good. I don't know where that went or what the process was, but I do know that he did go through that.
I made a note just to create the policy both for the disposal of unusable technology equipment and/or what Ethan said, and we'll do the same thing with furniture.
I actually think that if you start to offer some of these things, instead of just throwing everything away, you start offering them for sale. People in the community will see that we don't just spend money, but that we are thinking about ways that we can recoup some of that money. And it may not be much, or maybe nothing, but it at least is an action that shows that we're conscientious of it.
Well, to build on that, even if we give it away, it's still cheaper than to pay to throw it away.
Yeah.
Our desks, they're mostly metal, have a metal dumpster come in, and then they pay us to take it.
Yep.
You know, I mean, there's better ways to throw things away, or recycle them, or repurpose them.
I think there's a sense that I guess I would like us to have more of a sense of being thrifty. And as an example, a bunch of things in August got thrown in the dumpster. And among them were a bunch of teacher planning books, brand new. And I've noticed in the bills that we bought teacher planning books this year. So if someone doesn't want something, or someone thinks it's not good anymore, the first thing we think about should not be to throw it away. It should be how else can we use it. There were a boatload of Unifix cubes that were thrown away. They got rescued. They got rescued.
Storage issue.
I'm sorry.
I think that may go hand in hand with your storage issue, because if you don't have somewhere to properly store something, you're more inclined to throw it away.
I would agree with that. I think, but then again, it also has to do with the time of the year. And, you know, if you just say, you know, the school has these things, you have these days to come and get them, and hopefully it's during the summertime, and just say, come on in.
Right, I'm not saying we should hold it all till the fireman's auction. But, you know, when we
Well, there's
have
that too.
quiet times, that's what I was thinking in the school was, you know, in the summer when you're doing your replacements, you open it up and say, hey, Friday, this is the day, you can come get this stuff.
Yes, yes.
I do have one question in here.
Yeah.
I noticed on the plant operations, on line 430, repair and maintenance, that we added 10,000 and it says non-contracted maintenance and or repairs carpet tile. Are we replacing some more floors? Is that what that's for?
That's a note, that's not for the increase, that was a standard note for what we spend it on traditionally.
Oh, I wasn't sure. Well, because we've been doing some of those classrooms where we're spraying, and I didn't know if we were doing some more of those.
No.
Oh,
I probably should have added more to the note, but Pat can elaborate.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I should have added more to the note based on our conversation, but you could elaborate
On,
the 10
why we
grand.
added 10,000 to repair and maintenance.
give me a little tiny bit more.
We had a phone conversation about 5 hours ago.
Okay, and I'm sorry.
Did you?
So you had budgeted
Oh,
45,000.
you're.
Did you want an office
This
remake?
is definitely gonna cost you, the front office.
Oh,
Ah!
thank you. Yes. All right, sorry. Anyway.
I should have updated the note.
I've not been wild about, this is cosmetic. It's a cosmetic with a slight twist on environment, I think, is that I really don't like our front office window where Jess has two windows that she sticks her head out of.
That's awful.
To me, I would like a nice big counter that's open.
Yep.
It's all open and then at the end of the night with a kind of a steel big rolling thing that comes down and locks it up. But right now it is just, I don't think it's very kind of customer friendly.
It's not inviting.
I don't think our entranceway, to begin with, is inviting at all.
Yeah.
I'm
So
going to disagree with one part of it. We got a compliment last night from Swanton on how inviting your greenery is coming in to the school, and Swanton's trying to emulate it. So a piece of it's very, very nice.
Wow.
So they like the
Okay,
outdoors, but once they come indoors, we fall on our face.
But
over the
I want to
threshold.
say about that unless someone takes responsibility for
Yeah.
keeping that up, it's not going to happen, because the person who was doing that for numerous years no longer is in our employ.
Yeah.
So,
Or
and to
physically
it,
able.
you look at the garden over in the Casavant garden over in front of the white building with the snowboard bench, that's badly overgrown. And so there needs to be some work done on that.
I'll also help you to think about another component of what Pat talked about something that comes down. When Enosburg redid their high school, they have the ability to pull down I don't want to say,
It's a counter shot.
felon-proof entrance into the office. So if there's a major crisis and you need to lock down your school, that pulls down, and I even think it's bulletproof. I'm not saying that we go that route, but to be able to have something that can make the office very secure. Your office could very much be your incident command center in a school if there's a major emergency or crisis situation going on. So to think about it not only from an aesthetics, but to think about it from a safety standpoint, the ability to lock that door coming into the office and to pull something down quickly is a good idea.
Don't we have to do that? Any new construction like that doesn't have to be bulletproof?
No.
I thought if we place any glass or anything like that, it has to be bulletproof.
No?
Oh, I think our safety report said you had to have something on the glass, and you could buy
Yeah. It is. You
like
can
plastic.
put it on.
It's not plastic things, but things you could put on the window.
Right. And
Well,
other schools have done that.
IBM had it.
Yeah.
Like coated glass, like your windshield?
Yeah. Except that it's Lexan, and
Oh.
it is bulletproof. But there's no requirement that you have to do it. It's good practice to do it. And if you were doing that, I would strongly recommend that be a strategy that you pay attention to.
I think another thing that we should think about is, and Tuesday when I had a lot of time to be in the gym.
Oh.
Yeah, and I couldn't even shoot basketball. But anyway, I was thinking about, you can access that gym from many places in our school. And so, and the cafeteria. Well, the cafeteria only has one access. So I guess first of all, my questions are, when we have a lockdown, what if the kids are in the gymnasium? Or what if the kids are in the cafeteria? What do they do?
Kids in the gym would go up under the stage. So the idea there is you don't want to be seen.
So close the curtains.
Yeah. Cafeteria is a little bit harder.
Okay, so the stage, well, okay.
Yeah, the only place that people would see
Yeah.
is looking in from the main lobby into the gym, and if the curtain's pulled, then they can't see it.
I'm just going to say, we're entitled to have this kind of level
Yes.
of conversation in
Okay.
executive session.
You're right. You're right. Anyway, there are some doors over, where the handles aren't working, that go from the gym into going toward the cafeteria. So I was wondering about why that wasn't working as well. Okay.
So the good news is that with some help, I remembered what that was about. The bad news is that is a very rough. I'm the last person you want making an estimate on any kind of construction project.
Yeah, I was thinking you were way low if we're gonna do some sort of safety pull down, and I mean, the safety pull down's gonna be probably twice that installed. Cause I mean, just a rolling counter shredder that I used to install to cover that space is gonna be close to that price.
Okay.
And that's
Well,
not
and I also
broken
don't know which of those, those metal areas that crisscross across the glass there
Yeah.
are weight bearing or anything like that.
None of them.
No,
Okay.
because that was put in after the school was originally
Okay.
built.
Anyway,
That
so
part was built.
whatever. I just think it would really create a much more open, kind of interactive atmosphere. Jess is really, and Jess is kind of an asset. Not that we do things around personality, but she's just the highlight of everyone. And for her to be able to be face to face and not through glass or through a little window would probably I think have a really nice feel for the public.
I would agree with that. I am a little worried your estimate's a little low, but other than that, I mean, I think it's worth pursuing.
Yeah,
What kind of contractor, who would you get to do that?
I have no idea.
We don't have to worry about that yet.
Yep.
Yeah, too soon.
Too soon.
So I would like to go over this,
Sure.
not tonight,
Yep.
but when I've got the other ones in front of me.
And reference the variance column, on the far right, is that will tell you where the changes have been made since the last draft.
Over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just don't want to take up a lot of time with that tonight.
I got one more question on pupil transportation. I see there's a huge increase in sped transportation. Is that
That's the other thing I was gonna say. Your assessments that's one of your assessments. Your assessment numbers in this draft have not been updated. The first draft of the assessment, so meaning both special ed budgets, your
Oh,
ECP
I wondered
budget
about
and your
that.
central office budget have not been updated because the first draft of those was just going to Franklin Northwest on next Wednesday. So what I have done though is Becky and I have worked on reconciling the current year, and I know that some costs were up and some were down so far, as far as psychology, speech, and special ed, and so we've adjusted for those. So the variance you're seeing there is actually because of the change from the current year. We have a couple unanticipated special ed transportation costs. One is particularly high.
And we anticipate those are gonna happen again next year.
I have no reason to believe they won't at this
Okay.
point, but they could. Tanya, our new special ed director, is still catching up with, what we can do about those and problem solving and talking about what's going on, so.
The other piece too, keep in mind that when your revenues get edited into this, you're getting, is it 50% on transportation?
It's 56 and a half.
On
Oh, transportation.
transportation.
All special ed, yeah.
Yeah.
And
50%?
Up 56 and a half, up to
Okay.
$50,000. Anything over $50,000 is reimbursed at 90%.
But I'm talking about transportation. Is it still?
Anything, this kind of transportation, yes,
Yeah.
not your school
Okay.
buses, but this, yes.
So it hits you on the budget side, but a lot of that gets replaced on the revenue side. So,
But we might not get it this year.
right.
Other comments or questions? Thank you, Pat, thank you, Laura.
Scary
Any,
times.
any direction here will be appreciated. And again, Laura and administrators work on what seems to be the right way to go, and based on the needs of children and the needs of the school. Any direction the board has on individual areas or in general, now's a good time to provide that insight and that direction, insight in that direction, to help us better prepare for next month.
Are we gonna look at staffings and
Ratio.
ratios
Yep,
tonight?
I think we are. Yes, we are.
Okay.
You want to look at those now?
I
Oh, I don't know.
I'm not certain of who are contracted people in our building and who are included in the staffing ratios. So,
Well, what we've done, Pat's done a nice job of creating this, and very specific on with contractors and without. I can scoot over there and put it on projector if you'd like to see that. Is that something you're interested in?
It'd probably be helpful if I could.
Yeah.
I think it's there.
Of course, you've been on time again, isn't it?
We're gonna get it.
I did notice that the HRA costs are pretty significant increase on the very first page, but we're not, you've got a note that says 75 to 88% ER contribution.
75% of 88%. So the employer contribution that was negotiated was 88%. I'm budgeting for 75% of 88%. We don't know what the usage is going to be. They were saying 50 to 60%, and now the last meeting I went to actually said possibly 100%, but I think with what we negotiated, the structure of our HRA with the contributions being 12, 12, 88, I think 12, 12, 88 doesn't make sense, does it? 12, wait, 12, 12, what did we decide? 12, 12.
I shut that door.
It's too late.
Yeah.
12 and 12.
No, I think it was 10,
No, it's
80,
12,
10.
12.
Is it?
Yep. I'm sorry, I actually was in a meeting today talking about this all day, but
I believe you.
76, 12, 12, 76.
To experiment with.
That sounds
keep it
good.
going on.
Yeah, that is right. Now that
Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
So out of that 76%, we actually, ours is 12 and 76, so that's the 88%. So I'm budgeting 75. I may know in the next, actually I probably won't, because we won't even have people start to use their plans until January 1. We're already seeing a lot of movement with healthcare plans, people changing plans. Now, when we were doing the enrollment, so
The
these new
enrollment.
plans, it's gonna be an interesting first year for sure. And we now know that we're gonna have a 10.1% increase to Gold CDHP starting July 1, so
Wow.
You want to say that again?
10.1% increase. But it's still, even with a 10.1% increase, you're still saving money from the last plans that you had.
And that's
And
gonna-
part of that is being eaten up in your salary line, and part of that's being eaten up in your HRA.
When is that 10% take effect?
July 1. And 10.1% is what the increase is for gold CDHP. It's 17% on platinum.
How can they sell a plan and then have a 10% increase 6 months after it's?
Because they didn't have enough information to make an educated decision. They did the best they could, but they
Welcome
didn't.
to
They
the
don't.
state
They
of
didn't quite know
Vermont.
how this was all going to sugar out either. So.
But yet, because of all the money we save with insurance, we have to give a bunch back to the state to help them out.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
we should-
less next year than this
35% of
year.
that this year,
10.1%.
65%.
Yeah, when the
Next year.
10% kicks in.
Yeah, less this next year than this year.
Yeah, 65 and 35.
God bless us.
Let's not be bitter.
No.
So here are your ratios.
Okay, so, but can we go up to the data first?
Okay.
So I have a couple of questions. Some of these positions are not full-time positions. So when the ratios were calculated, did we calculate them as full-time positions?
No.
So you did it
So
at
like art
FTEs.
is just 0.8 FTE.
Correct.
And so when we figured out the ratio, it was 0.8?
Yeah, the only two positions that are not are 0.8 art and 0.6
Psychologist.
SLP. Sorry, you're right, and 0.6
Oh.
is school psychologist.
But also there's one SLP too.
Correct, yeah.
So what is hers?
Megan Rupert is 0.6,
0.6 as well.
same as the school
Okay.
psychologist.
Okay. Also, under other staff, are the 2 lunchroom aides, how are they factored in? Are they 1 FTE or are they point something?
They no longer work for us, by the way, which may be
Sorry.
something
We're
to,
0.0 right now.
something to note. They're aware of that. But
Stress
they
of
were-
the job.
I'm sorry?
Stress of the job.
That's probably the most appropriate way of mentioning that, of saying that, yeah. So they were 2 hours a day each, so 4 hours.
Are you looking to replace those this year?
I don't know how we would factor that in as a FTE. No idea.
It's a 0.33.
0.33.
And so the PBIS coordinator, what category does that fall under? Is it professional staff, a certified staff, para, or
It
what?
is
He's
neither.
out here.
So
Custodian and CS.
not certified.
So that would go under,
Front office staff type,
okay, so that would go under staff, okay.
yeah.
How about, the reason I had these guys is because I asked for them because I thought a question might come up Tuesday night about student staff of ratios at the meeting.
But they didn't.
No, they didn't, but I'd rather have it not need it than the other way around. So how about the pre-kindergarten program that's not the 30-hour one?
I did not include any pre-K in these numbers.
Okay, and that's the way the state does it as well? Okay.
And the state did not include bus drivers and did not include meal service staff. Not the aides, but the meal service staff. Initially they did, and then when they found out there was such a variance between contracted service and employees, that they decided to take it out.
Okay. So the school-based behavior consultant, that person works exclusively in Highgate?
Correct.
And how about the school-based clinician?
Exclusively in Highgate as well,
And they're full-time?
full-time.
Contracted services.
Those are contracted services. So we're including these.
Correct.
Are all schools including them, Lynn? Are all schools including their contracted workers?
Yeah, they did it with
And
contractors and without, yes.
We did it with, did we do it with or
Both of
without?
us.
We just did WIP.
Okay. Oh, heck. What was the other one I was gonna ask about? Oh, how about, the, ELL staff person?
He's an SU employee. He works in all schools.
He should still be counted,
Yeah,
just like all the other SU employees you're talking about.
okay.
He's charged .4 to Highgate.
Point four?
Okay. So that'll just about offset the two FTEs that are 0.0 FTEs in lunchroom.
It's actually only
So we're gonna call that
.25
a
if they're
wash.
10 hours, if they're only 2 hours a day. I thought they were 2.5.
Yeah.
And cat workers are counted as,
Contracted services, both full-time.
okay.
Can you send me that, Kat, or share that with me? Can you share this with me also? Thank you.
I feel like I'm missing part of why we're seeing this. Not that I don't find it interesting, but I feel like I'm missing the backstory.
Yeah, well, you're missing the contrast. And the contrast is the state last year did this analysis and it really ramped it up this year because this is where the money is. 87% of your budget is tied up in salaries and benefits. And so the money is where the people are. The statewide average 2 years ago for all staff to students in the state was 4.57 students per staff member, means employee. It's dropped this year to 4.25 to 1. We're looking at it from a standpoint, when you take all staff here, Highgate's looking at 3.9. So you're a bit less than what the statewide average is. And that's going to be important because I've been hearing the rumbling from legislature that that's an issue that is going to be heavy on the legislative agenda today. And when I was in Berlin and in Montpelier today, that's one of the reasons I was late, David, is I stopped in at the VSBA office to thank them for the advocacy that enabled us to have our superintendent search be up for 5 years, and had a conversation with Nicole Mace about what she thinks is happening in legislature, and she concurred that this is going to be a heavy drumbeat to have schools seriously look at their student staff and student teacher ratios. So we need to look at 3.9 students. Is less than the state average.
So, but how, okay, and how does, for classroom teachers, 1 to 15,
We're good on that level.
yeah, that sounds to me like good.
Yep.
That's good.
That's above the state average. And that's known as class size ratio.
Okay, and certified staff, 1 to 7.1, how does that rate?
We're a little less. Statewide is about 8.5 to 9. Again, it varied a bit between the two analyses, so we're a little bit less than that. I want to give you an idea of minute numbers do make a big difference. If on the statewide level, if 4.25 statewide all staff to student ratio, and that's compared to 78,000 students, if that number were to go to five students per staff, it would save anywhere from $75 to $100 million. And right now, we're 50 mils short in the ed fund that's causing tax rates to go up 8 cents if we flat level fund this year's budget to next year. So there's substantial money in small percentages here. It won't have the impact in Highgate because you're not talking a lot of employees, but it does have a substantial impact on the statewide level. And we are in this as a state. Any decisions we make here have impact not only on our fellow schools in Franklin Northwest, but it has impact, ripple effect all across the state. Because of the statewide funding system, and we just got a brand new YouTube clip from the VSBA about the ed funding system that I'm going to be showing.
I think that was sent to us
Yeah, I would ask you to take a look at it because it gives the history from '97.
recently.
Yes, in the last
But-
week
Yeah.
from the Vermont School Boards
Can you share
Association.
that with me and Becky?
I will.
I don't think I've done that.
I'll check and see
I'll make
now.
sure that.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at
I
it.
got it on Tuesday.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought I sent it to everybody. Sorry I didn't send it to our business office.
I got a question.
Why would the state send us that kind of thing?
Yeah. Has
So-
something to do with communication.
You're saying that we're at 3.9 students, we're a little below the state average?
Yeah.
How many schools in the state are above the average?
Quite a few. In fact, I think all our other schools in Franklin Northwest are above that average. I'd have to relook at that.
And
So-
I'd like to know how many are below 3.9.
Okay. In RSU or the whole state?
It should be information that's available.
Not for this year from all schools, not yet. It may be soon. You can see this is the October 1 census, and that's what drives this. I can tell you for the last couple of years what it is, and there's been a gradual migration. The other piece I wanted to say, it isn't just about quantitative data like this. At the same time, and I think one of the reasons that it gone from 4.57 to 4.25, the needs for students have been increasing.
Mhm.
So you can't only look
Mhm.
at just, the black and white numbers. You have to also look at, from a
Absolutely.
qualitative standpoint, the fact that more and more behaviors, more and more needs are happening in schools that are causing this solution.
So how is it that the legislature isn't on board with that theory?
I don't know.
Do they only think about money, or do they actually, somewhere in their discussions, think about student needs and special ed laws that have to be followed? Or is it just about the money for them?
I'll just answer that by saying that the legislature is a political animal. And one of the biggest drivers in legislature right now, and probably in any legislature, is the finances of the impact on taxes. And I'll leave it at that. And if you have ideas about that, I would encourage you to reach out to your legislators and share with them your interest in this, because that will help them to better understand the culture of schools and the needs of children.
Seems to be some kind of dome over Montpelier that keeps all common sense out.
That's because they don't have carbon monoxide detectors.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, must be.
But I'm serious when I say this.
We
You
are
reach
too.
out to your legislators, because legislators are not experts in all arenas. And
That's true.
we spend a lot of time in schools, they don't, and they pay attention, especially when school board members speak with them. Your elected officials, their elected officials. That has a tremendous influence on their thinking, especially if it comes in mass. So I will be doing an analysis of the ratios. That'll be ready for Wednesday for the SU board meeting. When I say ratios, I'm talking RSU compared to the state's latest iteration of that. So you'll be receiving that formally very soon.
So I don't think we talked about the ratio of paras to students. How does that compare to the state average, Lynn?
The paras to students is quite good, but that's, the way I will be presenting it is a combination of your staff and paras together, rather than having those splintered out.
Can't just look at pairs, because some
Right.
have changed their model.
Right. So you see up here as the header, when we talk student-staff ratio, it should be both of these together. So the state average is 4.25 non-licensed employees, 4.25 students to non-licensed employees. So it would be the aggregate of paras together with all of your other support staff. And I haven't pulled those numbers together at the bottom.
Last question, I
Yeah.
promise. So we have currently 3 out of district placements.
Okay?
Are they factored in our student count?
No, I believe they are.
Well, we're having to pay.
Oh, yeah.
So I would hope we would.
They would be.
Yeah, they've got to be, because your ADM is coming in for those kids here.
Right, I'm not sure what number you use to calculate this.
Right. Well, I don't know, 300 is a fluctuating number.
Correct, we're a little bit below 300 right now.
Yeah, 299, 298, that fluctuates every week.
You should
So-
be using October 1, because that's what the state likes to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
Or October 15, depending on what they're doing.
Right.
So
Okay.
I missed something. The number at the bottom that you're going to present, the 3.9, right?
Mhm.
That's total staff or just non-certified staff?
I'm going to look to Pat on that.
That's everybody.
Total staff.
This is
Okay,
total
because
staff.
when you just said that you were just lumping
Oh,
the
I'm
last
sorry.
two,
Thi-
it threw me off.
This is aggregated together.
Of
This is-
all the
This
categories.
is just paras.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Chris, I misspoke. Any other questions about student staff ratios?
Thank you.
I'll
Thank
just say
you.
that the Secretary of Ed is really encouraging school administrators and boards to monitor and manage the budget through your staffing, because again, that's where the money is.
And that's just incredibly difficult to do.
Yep.
Okay, next up.
I have actually one more question. So, homeschoolers are allowed to come into to the public school of the town they live in
Yep.
and get up to 40% of their classes
Yep.
done in the public school.
Mhm.
Do we get to count any of them, and
No.
do we have any significant number of that in this school?
You
I
count
don't
them in the
think so.
census.
Pardon?
You count them in the census. They get
For
a-
the percentage FTE that they're in school?
Right, you have to know when they're here and when they're not, and you get the hours.
Oh, you
Okay.
do? So they do count?
Okay.
Well, they go into the census. So I would have to,
See how that gets
Which is where-
counted for revenue.
which they do use to calculate ADM, but they
Yeah.
also calculate ADM in other ways, in other reports too, so I'd have to do more research on that.
Okay. I'll make a note.
Okay.
Moving right along, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we're at the consent agenda
Yes.
part.
Shall we?
Yes, we shall. Okay, so the first thing is the minutes for several meetings.
So can I just back up?
Sure.
Is there any direction at this moment in time as far as what you're seeing now, knowing your assessments have not been updated, you've seen your ratios, you've heard what Pat has changed,
So,
I'm just curious about next steps for the next draft.
so assuming, well, it's always dangerous, but assuming that the SU assessments will also be up,
I mean, special ed will probably be down, the other two will probably be up.
and we are at a 3.41% increase. It's going to be higher than that when we get the assessments for Triple E and the central office. So are we looking at a percentage number that we want to keep our budget at?
I say no. I say we create a budget that meets our kids' needs.
Okay. Okay.
And I hope that that's what this is.
Well, I'm just going to say that any budget is a balance between, in fact, it's in the Act 46 law. It's the fifth goal, and it's about, I'll paraphrase, operating schools at a level that meets student needs and is at a level that the community can afford and support. And again, that's broadly paraphrased. And that's how we look at when we're developing budgets. If we have Cadillac version, it'd probably be a lot more than this. And so it is a
Yes.
budget that balances basic needs and at the same time is affordable. And that's how we look at it. And that's what we're presenting to you now. You have choices as to whether you want to be a bit more on the austere side or a bit more on expanding resources for kids.
As we move forward to when we get later in December, I'll be able to bring you the tax rate, the calculations with the offsetting revenue, and we'll be getting some equalized
Right.
pupil numbers, and those are the big factors in what the taxpayers are going to be voting on. So, this is just one, I say this every year, this is now just one small factor in what your taxpayers will pay ultimately. So those other things will come into play. Unfortunately, we don't get them until almost January, and the yield doesn't even get set until legislature comes out of session. But
Other questions? Okay. Minutes.
We can lump these all together.
We
can't
can. So the
I read
October 4th minutes.
You want a motion to accept the minutes from the 4th, the 12th, and the 24th?
I thought we were doing a consent agenda, so I meant we could do all the minutes and the check minutes in one shot.
Okay, but we have to, I think it's important that in the minutes of this meeting, we have the totals for the check warrants.
Is there a way that we can start getting those numbers added to the agenda?
Yeah, because
When are the check warrant, where's that? When are the check warrant numbers determined? Let me see when this was, what's the date on this?
as soon as she pays the last bill, because it's not posted to the actual system until she actually pays the bill. So even though you've approved bills, it doesn't happen sometimes, but as soon as that happens, I can pull this information. That's not,
Okay.
I
Is
can't
that
always tell you
done?
exactly when that happens.
So usually we get the agenda the last Thursday. We get it about a week before the meeting.
I can check with Sue. Shelley has to come, she works hand in hand with Shelley, and each town is a little bit different, so I'd have to check with Sue. I compile the report after the fact, so I'd have to ask her.
maybe the check warrants shouldn't be in the consent agenda, because my idea of this consent agenda, my understanding is we could look at that and then just make one motion and
Well,
we're
yeah,
supposed
you're
to
right.
speed it.
You're right.
And obviously this is not happening, being the timekeeper.
Okay. The other way to do it is those get passed to the board secretary and get edited into the minutes, so the money does arrive there after the fact. So that's another way to do it as well. And I will say we'll do the best job we can to have the money ahead of time and edited into the agenda. So there's really two ways to get it done.
Well, I don't think the purpose of the consent agenda is to make more work on someone else's part, to make our speed it up significantly. So,
Well, I'm not sure it's gonna be more work. I just don't wanna speak to a timeline that I'm not part of. I'm just pulling a report. I can check into that. I'm not necessarily comfortable with it being added to the minutes after the fact, because this is something that
Yeah.
is by statute and has to come here.
Actually, the agenda usually, sometimes it's done a week at a time. I really strive to have it done by Friday of the
Right.
previous weekend, so that you have the weekend and 4 days of the following week to be able to review it. So I will just say we'll do our best job to have that in the consent agenda, because Chris is right.
Like, but it depends on where the meeting falls. I can tell you
Yeah.
by looking at the calendar, like even on the
Oh.
9th, that's gonna be tricky to have out the Friday before because things just haven't been posted through the end of the month and actually paid yet, and they just haven't. But
Okay.
sometimes it would be possible.
Okay. So we're gonna do each of these bullets separately. The motion is in order to approve the minutes as presented for October 4th, October 12th, and October 24th, board meetings.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Are you ready to vote?
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, the check warrants. Our total, $466,782.97
That's for the month of October.
for the month of October. Motion is in order to approve the total for the check warrants.
I'll make a motion for 46,780.
460, I think.
460.
Excuse me. forgot the zero.
466,782.97.
Oh, yeah, that amount.
A second?
I got a
Second.
zero.
Are you ready to vote?
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion
No.
carries. Principal's report.
Apologize for not having this ahead. I will state that the assistant principal was on time with his. I
Mhm.
dragged it down.
Wow.
But, so I'm gonna let Chris go ahead and talk about kind of the positive school cultures.
So, I referenced at our last board meeting and was uncomfortable sharing numbers because it was too early, that we are seeing kids spend a lot more time in class this year. Feeling at this point like there's a sufficient sample to start drawing a few conclusions. So I gave 3 statistics there, sort of from the beginning of the 4th week of school, which I chose because that's the end of like that honeymoon period where kids are just kind of learning norms and stuff. From that date to October break, this year we had 11.1 referrals a day. In the 11 school days since, we're down to 8.1. I think that speaks to a general sort of smoothing of some of our systems, sort of the behavior plans that we're putting into place for some of our kids who are generating a lot of these referrals. So we've seen a decrease this year, just over the last couple weeks. In addition, we've seen a more drastic decrease when you compare this year to last year. Last year, from, again, the end of that honeymoon period to, when I say today's date, it was whenever I did these stats, 16 and a half referrals a day. So we went from 16 and a half referrals a day from this period last year to 11.1 in that intervening period after the honeymoon to October break, and then 8.1 in the last few weeks. Obviously, it cannot continue to drop at this rate. We're going to see kind of a flattening out, I'm sure. I attribute some of this increased time spent in class by kids to a few things. We are not referring kids out for minor behaviors in the same way that happened last year, and I not being here, I don't know exactly what that looked like, but we are utilizing PBIS a little bit more, with a little bit more fidelity. Teachers are using those classroom supports, the reset space, their buddy room, stuff like that, to avoid referrals out of the room. Secondly, and I can't stress this enough, Sierra Smith, our school-based behavior consultant, one of those people in the far column on Pat's student ratio document, has designed some really great behavior plans for 6 of our highest need kids. And then our CAP program has taken on 2 of our highest need kids. That's 8 kids with really detailed behavior plans that are extremely data driven and based on a functional behavioral assessment. And we are seeing way less time spent out of class by those students, and as a result, it's pulling our average of referrals way down, which of course is good. It means kids are in class more often. And then the third reason, just we're being a little bit more proactive with our coins this year. We're sticking with it, and it's going to be a thrust that we go through June with. The only other thing that I'll point out, which is way later in the principal's report, is that we had the Circle of Courage in on October 27th. We're seeing a lot more enrollment with the Circle of Courage from Highgate this year. Pat, is it 8 students now as opposed to 2 last year? Are those the numbers? I can't remember, but it's significant. And then, Brenda Gagne brought her high school students over. They drummed, they sang. It was great. We're going to have them back at some point. And I will have a lot more news of community involvement in next principal's report. We have a bunch of really cool things coming up. We have a walking day. We have, well, you'll hear about it next time, but we've got a lot of cool stuff on the horizon in terms of community involvement, which I'm very excited about.
Cool.
And I would say Liza Comiskey has been amazing. She's been a great resource, both in her role as the fire department and the library. Really has helped tie our community together with the school.
Thank you. Questions for Chris?
I have one.
Good news. Sounds good, Chris. Thank you.
It's very good news. And I just wonder, and we could report on this next time if there's not a ready answer today, in what we talked about today in the administrative meeting, is there a relationship between implementing the multi-tiered systems of support and having those interventions and the PBIS together? Are there any cross-pollination or any affect from both of those together that would have some impact on why these numbers are going down? Or is it too early to tell?
I'm going to answer, and if I'm not answering the right question, then we can readdress it next time. So I think that PBIS, one of the 3 tenets of PBIS is really consistent in classroom behavioral sort of responses to unexpected behavior. And I think that those structures align with the components of some of our behavior plans for our tier 2 and really our tier 2 kids.
Okay.
And so I do think that those 2 things do have some synergy together, whereas apart they would still have some effect, but maybe not the same overall. That would be a good guess.
Share with the board that we are working very diligently around, you sometimes hear it called response to intervention, or you sometimes hear it called multi-tiered systems of support. So it's RTI versus MTSS. Connie and I had a conversation about that yesterday in preparation, 2 days, whenever the vote was.
2 days ago.
2 days ago. Because that likely could have been a question. The issue is we're concentrating really hard on quality first instruction, which means teachers attempting to differentiate instruction based on the needs of children. Behavior is not behavior alone. Behaviors sometimes happen because children's needs aren't getting met academically, and so first instruction is really about that issue. So is tier 2, and so is tier 3. But if you can get it taken care of in first instruction, meaning what's happening with all students in the class, then you may not need tier 2 or tier 3. So kids don't blow out always. Sometimes they do, just because of some personal needs. Sometimes it's a mismatch of how they're attempting to learn, how teachers are attempting to teach. So there's a synergy factor between the 2, and that's where MTSS lines up with PBIS and supports one another. So we'll continue to keep you apprised of that issue.
Is that data we're tracking?
Yes.
Where they don't match up the teaching style and the child's learning style?
I don't know that we have data quite at that level, but your PLCs, where the conversations are around academic needs for children and on behavioral needs of children, that's where our data is happening. the high school, they call them data teams, and the elementary school, they call them PLCs. It's the same stuff.
Does your data include, I mean, you talked about these ODRs. Does any of this include when the regular classroom teacher is not there? Do you store data where you have a referral, but the, they're out for
From a
whatever reason?
substitute, you mean?
Yeah.
And it does not have that capability in Swiss, or maybe it does, but the substitute teachers aren't in there. I can check on that. I don't know if we can put substitute teachers in the staff thing where you select.
It's a great question, though. It'd be interesting to see what behavior's like with response to a substitute teacher.
Anyone know who administers Swiss at the district?
I'm sorry?
Anyone know who administers Swiss at the district? I could ask that question too.
Yes, that would be,
Emily?
I think it's Emily Weaver. Swiss. Well, you do it at your local schools. I don't, most likely it's her.
Okay.
She does VCAT, she does Goldview. I don't know if she does Swiss.
Okay.
Okay.
And I don't normally do this, but my wife is at the train station. And I probably should go down and get her soon.
She's there, she's been there now?
Yeah, Amtrak, I thought it'd be later. So I'm going to ask if it's okay if I do this
I
and
was
run.
going to have you go
course.
anyway because Pat's been ill today.
You have,
Came in for the board meeting.
you asked for a school improvement plan. So I'm going to give you, that is a draft, but I think it's about 90% done. I think it needs a little bit of tweaking, but it's also in the format that the state is going to require next year. Libby has been great about getting us going on that format this year, just as a matter of getting used to it. I will say it is definitely getting used to it though, and it was not that easy. Christy Barton over at Sheldon spent a lot of time on the form, and she was very helpful. So I think it'd be something that if you have it and you want to talk about it next month,
Actually, I've got a lot.
I will probably present a final one, but it's not going to be a whole lot different than that.
Thank you very much, Pat.
All right?
I'm anxious to look at it.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay. And I'm going to ask that Chris be excused as well, because I think we're done. We don't have any executive session late hour things. Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
thanks
both.
everyone.
Hope you're feeling better.
Appreciate it. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is,
Drive careful.
I'm going to be very short.
Good.
I already have done half of it, student-teacher ratios. The only thing I'm going to say about solar, October 26th, solar arrays went live. We are saving money in the net metering already. I can't tell you how much, but I'll tell you that in the projections, Highgate saving $6,000 a year. I'm going to cut the year in half, even though we're not halfway through it, and say it's likely at the end of the year we're going to show at least $3,000 worth of net metering credits that will offset some of the energy expense that we pay. So it's up and running. We'll be doing a press release in the near future. I just wanted you to know that.
questions for Whitman? Okay. Old business.
I don't know if you want to do any Act 46 vote debrief. I think it was pretty clear.
I just want to speak to the
Yeah.
camera and thank the residents of Highgate who came to the Act 46 meeting this past Tuesday evening. We had a great conversation. It was encouraging to hear you talk about the things that you think are important,
Yeah.
the education of our kids, and it was also nice to have validation of how we thought you were thinking, but we never had, that was just anecdotal stuff, information, and so thank you very much. And we live on to fight another day.
Mhm. Yes, and we'll see how that plays, but I will tell you that even though we suspected where people stood on this in most communities, it was a slam dunk with every town but Swanton. And we're doing an exit poll with what's called a random stratified cross-section of Swanton voters from the checklist. So in other words, the 286 that went to the polls, we're going to be randomly calling some of them just to see were they confused? Because remember, in an Australian ballot, you don't have the ability to explain what it meant the way that Franklin, Highgate, and Sheldon did. Because I'm going to be, my suspicions are there were 153 yes votes, 143 yes votes, 115 no votes, and I'm betting that many of those no votes were because they didn't fully understand what the yes and no means. But
I know
like to
one
know
for
that.
sure.
What's that?
I talked to a Swanton resident, and she voted no, and she did not want to. She was confused, did not understand it. So there's some feather in our cap for doing it on a floor vote rather than Australian ballot.
Absolutely.
Thank God for town meeting days.
Yep. Yep.
Instead of Australian ballot.
Right. So.
And it was quite enjoyable to have Highgate people talk about something in a positive way and supportive.
Yeah.
And that's great.
People in Montpelier, people in other places are flabbergasted at the conclusive voice of the three towns. And you never have unanimous votes or one vote off anywhere. You always have a few. It might be a clear majority, but never what we had here. So kudos to all of the residents that came out for a non-town meeting vote.
There was a few other towns in Vermont. It was Brattleboro and
Chelsea and Tunbridge voted to do a merger,
right,
which closes Chelsea High School with 36 students.
but Brattleboro asked, they did a vote for a merger and were turned down.
Okay, I didn't see that.
I forgot where I saw that.
Yeah, I think there was something in the Free Press. I didn't see that part on Wednesday, but I heard something about it. So there continue to be votes. Franklin Northeast is going to vote on the 28th of November to do a side-by-side. So stay tuned for that one. That's a bit closer to us.
A wee bit.
Yeah, we bet.
And kudos to Connie for the work she did on,
Yes. And
on the committee
postcards.
and the postcards and
Noah helped with the postcards.
Good.
Noah, but also explaining it to the people.
Yes, it was very well done.
Room for improvement. New business. Thank you, Mr. Roddy.
Well, you're certainly welcome.
New business.
I don't have any.
Okay, well, that was
Any
a
new
quick
business,
one.
Mr.
We're
Shepherd?
moving along. Future
I
meeting
can speak
dates.
up, I'm okay.
I'm just checking.
Next
have a-
Highgate board meeting is December 14th at 6:30. The Act 46 meeting is next Monday at 6 o'clock in the MVU library.
And I want to stress, that's at
Posting,
6,
yeah, like
not at 7. If there are any voters or residents that would like to attend that. it's an open
So
meeting.
this says that your
Keep it
next
quiet.
SU meeting is December 6th.
It is.
Oh,
Well,
I
we
thought
have
you
one-
earlier
one
you
next
said it was
Wednesday.
next
Well,
week, I thought.
We have one on the 15th in Franklin,
Yes.
and then in Highgate on December 6th.
Yeah.
Okay, so your
November's
next one
meeting
is,
was late.
Yeah.
so your next meeting is November 15th.
Correct.
In Franklin?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I hope they have pie for munchies. They make good pies.
That would be good.
Whatever they made last time was good. I don't think it was pie though.
It was cookies.
Or bars?
That
Okay, next up on the agenda is executive session, where premature public knowledge would clearly place the board or other party at a substantial disadvantage
I make a motion to go into the executive session.
for evaluation
I have
issues.
one very short issue.
I'll second it.
And are you ready to vote?
Sure.
All those in favor of entering executive session at
Midnight.
9:45? 9:47, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We're in executive session.